This podcast is brought to you by patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. Head there to check out exclusive podcasts like Talking Futurama, Talk King of the Hill, the What a Cartoon Movie podcast, and tons more.
Cartoons from present and the past. Every week will be an animated bash. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! Maybe a short but mostly shows. We'll talk, we'll analyze, exploring as we go. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to What a Cartoon, the podcast that will cut you in half. I'm one of your hosts, the non-giving-up revenge guy, Bob Mackey, and this is an audio exploration of every cartoon ever who is here with me today, as always.
Hey, it's Henry Gilbert, and where's Puck? That's what I'm saying the whole time.
He's just off screen in every shot. And who do we have on the line?
It's Devin Hofarth, and you couldn't really call this a podcast. It's more like a giant slab of audio.
That's true. And this month's episode is the Berserk episode, The Band of the Hawk.
Lousy son of a bitch.
Excuse me. That's Guts, everybody.
Oh, that Guts.
This
Good
episode
old Guts.
is brought to you by Devin here, who's on the line, one of our premium patrons, and he chose Berserk in this episode. And Devin, to quote the famous Berserk opening song, tell me why, tell me why, tell me why you chose this anime.
So the first podcast I did with you guys, as you might remember, was the D&D podcast, and that was a fantasy show, and it was also anime. So I thought to myself, well, let's do a fantasy anime after that. But there was actually a few that I wanted to do. So if you're a part of the Discord, you might know this, but I actually ran a poll for a bunch of fantasy anime to do. And the options were Sword Art Online, Vision of Escaflowne, Record of Lodoss War, and originally it was actually going to be an episode of Hunter x Hunter that was this option. But a certain event happened in 2021 that made me decide, no, I should put this on here just to be on the safe side. And it won because, yeah, we'll talk about it, but this is sort of a sequel to your Millennium Actors podcast in several ways.
Yeah, depressingly so, yes.
I got just as said doing research, even though Berserk is awesome. And Devin, how far do you go back with Berserk?
I go back, the anime anyway, it takes me all the way back to my high school years, and I was a weeb growing up in the early aughts, and that was the era of torrents and fan subs. So this anime and I, kind of go back to that era where there was like a list of the classic anime that you watch, things like Trigun, Cowboy Bebop, Outlaw Star, which it's different now. Now it's more like, this anime is a romance, this anime is an action. There's not like Azumanga Daioh right below this show, which is just weird to think about now.
Yes, yeah. No, my history with this is kind of similar to mine with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, where it was my big, until about 5 years ago, JoJo as well was my big anime blind spot, that I always heard about it as this is a very influential anime. They started in comic before that, and they started around the same time even, and I'd always hear everything you like in video game X or other series Y, well, Berserk did that first, and they're influenced by Berserk, and it was always more available here than JoJo was, but I only really gave it a shot a couple years ago when Dark Horse started putting out the big books. And then, of course, current events happened that pushed me to I feel bad I didn't read this before. Even though I had cool friends like Bob Mackey telling me,
That's true.
Hey, read
I am
Berserk.
cool.
Yeah.
And I did say that.
I read the manga of Berserk way, way, way back. I think I actually, I read it shortly after I saw the anime, I'm pretty sure. Because everyone on the, I went on 4chan in case you couldn't tell, but everyone on 4chan was just saying, no, the manga is where it's at. If you want a continuation of the story, because this anime does end on a very, very, very bad note, then they just said, read the manga, just read the manga. And that's what I did. And I read all of it. And of course, the manga will end on a non-anticlimactic
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
you couldn't have known that.
Yeah.
The ultimate cliffhanger. As for me, I joined an anime club in my first semester of college because I wanted to have lots of sex, and that's where you go. And there were whispers of this dark, fucked up anime with blood everywhere, and it was Berserk. And there were rumors like, oh, it was so violent. They canceled it. They never made a second season. And I was like, oh, I got to see this dark, fucked up, violent anime. And we watched a few episodes at the anime club, and then by that point, in early 2002, that's when it was started coming over on DVD. Media Blasters brought it over, and in the middle of that DVD release, the manga was coming out by Dark Horse. So I bought all the DVDs, and I started buying all of the manga. And by the time I got to like the 27th volume that I purchased, I was moving a lot, and I thought, well, number one, I if I'm lucky, I'll make $10,000 a year at this point in my life. It's really hard to justify paying $15 per manga book for like 40 minutes of entertainment, but also I don't want to move 30 books around the country just to read one series. So I stopped reading it then, and I forgot about it for about a decade until the author passed away at a very fairly young age. And it's because of this podcast I've become a Berserk guy again, and thankfully as of 2017 this has been all available digitally, so it is so easy to read now. You don't need to buy 41 books anymore. We have been set free by the digital age.
I think another thing that did push me to pick it up was, and I wasn't a particularly close watcher of Game of Thrones, but the final season left me going like, man, why do people like this show? This sucks. That was my main reaction to it. And I saw a number of people I respected who were watching Game of Thrones at the same time saying like, you should read Berserk. Like, Berserk is a way better version of this story. I was seeing definitely just screens next to each other of Daenerys and Griffith, like that they, these white-haired people who have heel turns, let's say, in wrestling terms. So that kind of pushed me to finally read it too. Plus, after my enjoyment of JoJo, I was like, all right, it's time to deal with the other elephant in the room. And I mean, yes, the passing of the creator, that also really pushed me to it. But I wish I'd watched this anime back then, but I also didn't give Media Blasters much of a chance because they were, to me, the porno company that occasionally put out like real stuff. Like they
released like Rurouni Kenshin too.
That's true. Well, you can't talk about that no more.
No, there will be no episode about that.
No.
And you called them a porn company, and this anime and the manga especially should have a bit of a content warning given here. If you are at all squeamish about, say, sexual assault and nudity or, bad things happening to innocent female characters or heck, even male characters and children, maybe do not give this a watch just to be on the safe side.
I was warned about that too. I was like, I think it's fair to give people a content warning, but I also, I've only read now 2 of the giant volumes, which is like up to volume 8 of the regular collections, just to give people an understanding. But I mean, I don't feel like those elements are done. They're there for a reason. Like, at least they're not gratuitous. I don't know. Maybe some later ones are. I can't say.
I think. I mean, I read a lot of the manga, probably like almost 30 volumes. I think at times I was like, well, you're doing this to titillate me, right? I mean, it's sort of like having it both ways at times, but it's not always like that. But it's the same thing with Game of Thrones.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like you're not writing this violence to shock me or to make me throw the book down in disgust. You're like, isn't this awesome, kind of, in a way?
Or isn't this character evil? Like, yes. But
the thing that I've always kind of respected about this story is how Miura is able to give Guts a sense of vulnerability to him in the face of, the terrible things that happened to him as a child. Like, yes, something very, very bad happens to Guts as a child, which this episode kind of shows off in metaphor, which we'll talk about. And he gives him a trigger, like an actual trigger, before we really understood what that was, I think.
Yeah, we'll talk about it, but I mean, coming to this 12 or 13 years later, knowing a lot more about like mental health and PTSD, it's remarkably well done in a series you wouldn't expect it in.
Yeah, in a series that's so over the top and like hardcore in violence, and like so many pages are just like, isn't it awesome? Like, look, this guy's head was cut in half. Look at this fucking shit. Boom.
Yeah, lots of splash panels of the end of a sword swing with just bodies and torsos and heads and arms flying everywhere.
But yeah, Guts' betrayal is actually nuanced. It's great. If you when I opened the first book of it and saw it was like Guts fucking some lady and then the lady turns into a monster and he cuts the monster's head off, I was like, okay, I guess I understand what this is. But then
it's the perfect intro. It's like, here's what you're in for.
But yeah, his characterization of a man, who pushes everyone away because of traumatic events that happen in his childhood, like that, it actually is pretty nuanced in its portrayal.
I mean, ultimately, it's the story of the most cursed human being alive.
Yes.
And I think on a Chapo Trap House a long time ago, I think Felix said, so many guys think they're Guts. Like, every guy works at like a Staples is like, I'm secretly Guts. I'm totally fucked up.
You don't want to live the life that Guts has. Like, Guts is a cool guy, but he's a cool guy because he had to survive that bullshit to begin with.
Coming to this at almost 40 is different than coming to this in my late teens, early 20s, when I did think, like, yeah, everybody's unfair to me too. If only I had a cool sword.
The world's out to get me. I'm going to show them all.
The best description of Berserk that I've ever heard, or the best critique, quote unquote, that I've ever heard for it is, if it was just, this cool, awesome, badass guy going around killing demons with his giant fuck-ass sword, it would still be worth reading just because the art is so good. But the fact that it's also this very compelling drama and character study on top of that is really just the meat of the pie, almost.
I agree. Yeah.
So let's go over briefly. Here's a brief overview of just Berserk content in general, just what exists out there. So this show is based on a manga, which is a Japanese comic series. So it ran for 364 chapters, which had been compiled into 41 volumes, and it ran from 1989 to 2021. So 32 years this manga series ran. Dark Horse began releasing English-language versions of these in 2003, and at 50 million copies in circulation, it's one of the highest-selling manga series of all time. It's sold more than things like Inuyasha, Sailor Moon, and Yu Yu Hakusho. So it's like in the second tier of highest-selling manga of all time, it's up there. It's not anything like One Piece or Dragon Ball, but it's still really high up there.
But for that much, like Sailor Moon had very popular anime adaptations. This never really had, like, it's the manga itself sells it more like this for the timeline. It's almost a decade before this series came out that we're talking about, and it wasn't popular enough to sustain 2 seasons.
And as far as availability goes for these, we talked about it up front, but Dark Horse in 2019 began re-releasing these as very, very nice hardcovers that are huge and heavy. But as of 2017, I think it's all available digitally, and it wasn't before. So again, I'm glad these old-timey manga authors are letting this happen. We still need to break Urasawa. We need to break that man.
Some of his stuff is in Japanese on an app for digital, so I'm hoping that will cause him to finally let Viz do that stuff digital as well. Though, I think Takashi Rumiko also is not the most friendly to digital as well of the old guard.
No, come on, Granny. Get with the times.
Listen to Toriyama. He's probably even Araki. I mean, Araki hasn't given everything, but he's given at least a good amount of JoJo to digital.
And we'll go into more detail about the anime and the manga, but here's just the broad overview. So the anime series, 25 episodes from October of 97 to April of 98. We talked about it earlier, but Media Blasters brought this out on DVD in the United States in the early 2000s, started in 2002. It's not available streaming, although if you want to go on YouTube and watch it all, it's just there, the dub and the sub. And in 2009, there was a DVD collection of the Media Blasters transfers and dubs, but I was reading some things on Amazon, like it's a bad transfer. You could tell it was transferred from VHS masters, so there's like tracking errors throughout. But if you don't want to pay for that, again, nobody's watching, keeping their eyes on the copyright infringement, so it's just on YouTube.
Maybe Discotech.
Also, let me just say, boy, it sure is great that Discotech Media has announced that they are going to be releasing this on DVD and Blu-ray. You should go buy that right now. And if that hasn't happened by the time this episode comes out, then forget that.
It happens to us
hey,
more
I'm not
times
taking
than
any
not.
chances after Future Boy Conan.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's been now 13 years since the last release of this, so it might happen. But if not, just watch it on YouTube until then. And yeah, these DVDs from Media Blasters, I think in the aughts at least, they were really famous for the outtakes, the dub outtakes. So they would put those as extras on the disc because they were given no extras by Japan. So it was just dub actors fucking up, and you can find these on YouTube, and they're all very, very funny.
The voice actor for Griffith, he takes it one step above, where he just starts singing a song during one of those dub outtakes.
I remember watching the DVDs with my friend, and we would always like finish off the session with watching the outtakes.
Oh, that's fun. You can't. They're more watchful of those dubs now. You can't have that kind of fun anymore.
It's disrespectful.
I remember that secret dub track on the last episode of Evangelion that ADV did of Shinji just going like, "Is that it? What? The movie?" Like his Texas accent kind of, because Spencer is effing around, that he's just like, his Texas accent kind of bleeds through a bit more as he's complaining of like, how is that the end of the show?
That's, I totally
You ran out of ink too, didn't you, you bastards?
Right.
Was that on the Platinum Collection?
I think it was. I think it was.
And of course, we're doing this podcast part because the creator, Kentaro Miura, passed away in May of 2021 at the age of 54. And that means he was a manga wunderkind, like the One Piece guy, because he started this series when he was like 22 or 23.
I could not believe that he was that. When I saw his age, I was like, and then did the math when he passed away. Yeah, that was only when it really hit me his age. Like Eye Patch Wolf is also a big fan of Berserk, and I saw him make the point, like he dug up one of his first comics and he's like, yeah, look at something he did years before Berserk. He's like, yeah, this looks a little amateurish. He was 10 when he drew this, and I was like, whoa,
yeah,
wow.
He was immensely talented from birth. Let's do a little bio on him. So, like a lot of manga authors, he was very reclusive by choice. So there's not really a ton of information about him. There'd be even less information if he didn't die, because a lot of this came out at people talking about him and his legacy and people that worked with him. But we know manga authors, they don't like pictures of themselves often, and they don't like to do interviews. They like to be very reclusive, and unlike all artists in America.
Comic book artists mostly don't get featured because the publishers don't want them to be famous. But I mean, even recently, the My Hero Academia creator, he came to San Diego Comic-Con, and he was so just like, wow, you guys love me in America. That's great. He's not used to doing big cons, but I remember Viz was putting out pictures from the con, but they censored his face because clearly he was like, please don't show my face in this.
I mean, normally there will be just one known picture of a manga artist.
Yes, yeah.
Taken against their will, like at a con or in the middle of the street or something.
I think every manga artist just needs to get like a Yoko Taro style head thing.
Yes, just a giant mascot head based on however they draw themselves in their own comics.
I mean, that's what Toriyama's been doing for, decades and decades. He has
that little gas mask guy that he just represents himself with.
Yeah, they can't all be as hunky as Araki, like he's the one exception to the rule there.
He's so photogenic.
Yes.
I have to look this up now, but back to Berserk. So there will be a manga style biography about Miura, written by his friend Koji Mori. We'll talk more about him later, but he collaborated with Miura as early as high school.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. I want to hear about this, man.
And a lot of this bio is pulled from the old Japanese Berserk official website, where Miura basically wrote a biography of himself in bullet points. So a lot of this is Google Translate of that document that Miura wrote 25 years ago now. So, he's pretty hard to pin down in terms of life details, but a lot of it is just contained in that bio he wrote. So, born in Chiba in Japan on July 11th, 1966, Miura took an interest in art early in life and created his first serialized manga series for a school publication in 1976, which means he was 10. And it was titled Miu Ranger, which is a good pun because his name is Miura.
That's great.
And apparently this had 40 installments, and there are no scans of it online, but I really want to see what his art looked like at the age of 10. Was that what was featured in the Eye Patch Wolf video?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It might have been Eye Patch Wolf just showed I think it could have been his first submitted pilot thing, perhaps. Maybe predates that or is after that thing, but yeah.
I'm just wondering if any of those Super Sentai heroes that he drew had a giant sword.
You got to think every Sentai team needs one sword guy.
Yeah,
for sure.
Or maybe he was a giant sword. We need to track this stuff down. Now that he's dead, we can just violate his privacy. privacy, right?
Yes, yeah. I guess dig through his house, ransack it.
So he was born with immense raw talent, obviously, but his parents were both artists, so fostered his creativity. So his father created storyboards for commercials, and his mother was an art teacher. So from an early age, he understood the ideas of what sequential art is and how you use art to tell a story.
That's cool. I that also shows seems like they would have been supportive to him in his youth, getting a start even seemingly way before high school age. There's you hear about manga artists who's well, my parents made me go to college, but I was submitting to Jump the whole time. This seems to be even before he's done with middle school, he's getting into the profession.
Yeah, early on in life, he had a real path through the arts. And when he was 11, he had a second manga series he was writing or drawing. So that was called The Way to the Sword. Again, this is also unavailable and, published through, school publications. Somebody out there in Japan has to have it. So after this, he would seek out a high school with a good arts department because in Japan, getting into a high school is like getting into a college here. It's you have to test rigorously for it. And he did, and this is where he met manga artist Koji Mori, who's none of his work has been translated into English, unfortunately. So, I don't know what he's done. I mean, I've seen the titles, but I've never read them.
Is he another of those seinen guys who just, it's not as popular here, so the stuff doesn't come?
Something he's done is called Suicide Island, so maybe.
Okay, all right.
I don't want to go there.
That sounds like a death game kind of thing.
Yeah. So Miura has admitted on the record that he and Mori are sort of like Guts and Griffith. That's where the relationships comes from. But often they would change roles. So he was not always Guts and Mori was not always Griffith. It was just these two rivals. We've seen it in so many manga and anime series, but these two friendly rivals who are, bettering each other through competition.
Iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
I mean, no, it is such a typical shonen storyline thing of the rival thing that the view of Miura is Guts is hard to not think about when I see so many stories of oh yeah, he pushes himself too near death, but that's when he feels the best. It's especially with the end of his story, it's hard not to see that.
Hey, Guts never took sabbaticals like Miura. He at least took breaks. So
I wonder if Miura ever went on a boat.
Spent a long time, a very long time on a cruise. Never came home.
Yeah.
So the two, Mori and Miura, they collaborated on a sci-fi manga to submit to the weekly anthology Shonen Sunday. Now, if you're new to the world of manga and anime, in Japan, they do it in a very smart way where there are big anthology magazines where things are published chapter by chapter, sort of like the amount of content you get in a floppy issue of a comic. And then once enough chapters come out, those are collected into a book that you buy later. And for the most part in America, we just buy the books. We wait for all the chapters to come out digitally, or in the olden days, just published in Japan, and then we would wait 6 months for a book to come over here. And Miura says this work they submitted was crummy, but their piece made it to the last round of selections. And for this piece, Miura did backgrounds and drawings of mechs, while Mori drew the characters. And I read an interview with Miura where he just laughs when the interviewer asks if he'll ever publish this. He's like, no. It's in a bag somewhere. I have it saved, but you'll never see it.
I just got this collection of Toriyama, old stuff, his deep things, and a couple times in it, he goes you shouldn't even be reading this, but I guess if the publisher wants it out there, then fine.
You're paying to dig through my trash.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
You would hope that Dark Horse would release those comics at some point.
Yeah, they have released other things he's done, and we'll talk about that very soon. But more facts came out about Miura after his death. So after graduating high school, he did what many budding manga artists did by being an assistant to somebody. And he was briefly the assistant of George Morikawa, who the same year as Berserk would start writing and drawing Hajime no Ippo, the boxing manga.
Oh, nice. Man, I can see he's stylistically, that's a good fit for him to assist on. Yeah.
And Morikawa has a little quote about Miura upon his passing that really shows off just how he was too talented to be an assistant as soon as he got out of high school. It's no, you have to leave and do your own thing. Don't waste your time here. So this is what Morikawa said. He says, quote, when I asked Miura to show me some of his drawings in his sketchbook, it stopped my heart and gave me goosebumps. Within were drawings of fairies, a certain brand, a swordsman wielding a huge sword, the beginnings of what would later be Puck and Guts, all drawn in thick lines. It was too much. What is all this? I asked him. He says, they're what's inside my head. I want to get better, so I thought I should draw them. How long had he been saving these up in his head, I wondered? Berserk was already there in those drawings. So this was in the early 80s.
Wow.
He had the characters of Berserk figured out for the most part.
Wow. Man, he's like that knight trying to hire Guts, and then he's like, oh, wait, actually, you're too good for me. You got to get out of here.
You compared him to Oda a while back, and that actually does seem very similar, because if I recall correctly, similar deal with Oda, actually. Didn't he have a lot of the characters and ideas for One Piece laid out when he was like a kid or something?
Yeah, and just like Miura, Oda had to do very little work before immediately having a huge hit with One Piece. So yeah, Miura even says oh yeah, I took off really fast, so no one really edited me, so I'm kind of a problem because of that. I got very little feedback. After high school, this is 1985, Miura attended an art school called Nihon College. He honed his skills even further, and he submitted this project, and he won this newcomer manga award from Shonen Magazine. So he's already winning awards. The thing he did with his buddy Mori won that second prize award too. So he's already picking up awards without even really being professionally published quite yet.
Wow.
And his true debut was a one-shot named NOA or Noah, published in Fresh Magazine in 1985. It was a post-apocalyptic story, but not successful enough to become a serialized series. And upon learning this, it makes a total amount of sense that Miura super influenced by Fist of the North Star. So when I first read Berserk, I had not seen any Fist of the North Star. Now I have. And Fist of the North Star is all about everyone laughing at the main character what's this guy gonna do? Oh, he's just one guy. And then they end up being exploded or chopped in half or whatever. And that's exactly what happens. Everybody just runs directly at Guts' sword in this manga.
Look at this loser. Blah, blah.
Yeah. That is one thing about the writing for Berserk that I'll admit is kind of hacky. Just so many encounters in this manga are just nothing can stop the purple rhino army of death. Oh my god, how is he doing this? How is he killing us?
It's very much like Fist of the North Star. That's like what most of that manga and anime series is. He would go on in 1988 to be a artist for this manga called Oro, which is translated to King of the Wolves, and this was his first real professional gig on a serialized manga. It's serialized by Monthly Animal House, who will later publish Berserk, and he is actually working with the writer of Fist of the North Star. So immediately after high school, after college, his first gig is working with the hero figure of his life, the guy who created his favorite manga. He's now illustrating his stories.
That's amazing.
Which is crazy.
Yes, that's what... Yeah, that actually does feel more like Griffith's just immense talent just instantly rising to the top.
And Miura would collaborate with this guy a few more times while doing Berserk. So in 1990, he did the sequel to that manga, Oro. And then in 1992, he did another post-apocalyptic series called Japan, which Dark Horse did localize. So he worked on 3 post-apocalyptic stories with the king of post-apocalyptic manga before and during Berserk. But 1988 is the year when his 48-page Berserk one-shot gets published in the anthology Monthly Komi Komi. And Dark Horse would publish this in, I believe, volume 14 of their releases. So it's out there. You can read the prototype for Berserk. And this happens a lot. I hate to keep comparing this to One Piece, but One Piece has a one-shot called Romance Dawn you can read. That is basically mostly One Piece figured out. And in that prototype, Berserk is mostly figured out. But you can see how, it was the starting point for a much better story.
Yeah, in that Toriyama collection I have too, it's got the Dragon Boy pilot comic.
That too.
You can you see he's almost there. He's almost got it figured out. Yeah.
The only thing about that one shot that you mentioned that don't like Guts with an eye patch. It just seems wrong to me.
Yeah,
I like Guts when he just has his closed eye.
Just a closed eye.
And apparently he's more of a wisecracking hero, more smarmy, and they really cut that up by making him usually uber serious all the time and having no time for bullshit.
They definitely give Puck more of the shenanigans in that, which I guess we'll talk a bit more about Puck when after the history section.
Mm-hmm. So yes, this wins an award too. So he keeps winning all of these awards. He wins second place again, this time at the Komi Komi Annual Awards, and he pitches this manga series to Monthly Young Animal, who he was working with previously. And apparently at this point in time, it was very, very hard to sell a fantasy series, but Miura says this this manga magazine was going under, and they seemed pretty desperate. So they did buy this series from him, and he starts serializing it in 1989, October of 1989. This would continue within the same magazine. It's later renamed to Young Animal. This would continue until September of 2021, when the last chapter is released posthumously.
Whew,
Yeah.
Wow, man, at the same place the whole time. When it he sounds like he saved that magazine and then by appearing in it.
He very well might have. So one final thing about Miura. This is the end of the bio here. Despite the bleak and grim and violent subject matter depicted in Berserk, his editors had this to say about him upon his passing, quote, "We had honestly never seen him angry or upset. He was a happy person with the heart of a young boy."
Wow.
Now think of that while you read Berserk.
Wow. That is surprising to hear. Yes. Yeah.
It definitely reminds me of that meme that goes around where it's like Hayao Miyazaki's drawings, Hayao Miyazaki. Junji Ito's drawings. It's Junji Ito. Junji Ito's drawings, or stuff like that.
Yeah, the happiest guys draw the most fucked up manga.
Because they get it out loud on the page.
Yeah. Instead of whipping your artist to draw that pie better. I want to taste that crust. So, yes.
Yeah, I want to see every strand of that spaghetti.
The end of our story with Miura is he passed away at 54 due to aortic dissection, which is a tearing of the aorta of your heart. On May 6, 2021, obviously far too young. Berserk is in limbo. Another series he's working on called Duranki was finished and ended by the publisher after his death. And Miura was not the artist of that manga, but he wrote it and he drew storyboards for the artist to follow. So he's working on more than Berserk throughout his life.
His way of death is also how Yoshifumi Kondo passed away. We talked about that same aortic dissection thing, which in Kondo's case, it pretty explicit, overwork, just you push your body too hard and something breaks, and that. And we also, you had mentioned earlier, Devin, how the similarities with Millennium Actress topic we talked about, it was an aortic dissection, but it was the overwork Satoshi Kon went through. He didn't check to see if he had cancer until it was far too late.
And they both worked with Susumu Hirasawa.
Yeah. That's a big connecting factor. Two creators, too talented for this world, who died far too early, both connected to Hirasawa. I think we should investigate.
Yeah, you know what? If there's a third, if he ever worked on a third anime series and that guy goes,
check his basement.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a bit about the manga series before we move on to talking about the anime it's based on. So as I said before, there are 41 volumes in total. So we're going to do a broad overview because you can do an entire years-long podcast series about Berserk. So to be reductive, we used this comparison before, but it's basically Game of Thrones a decade before Game of Thrones was even written. So it's essentially the same kind of ideas, the same kind of themes, but let's just say it's better, because I think it is. Being completely ignorant to Game of Thrones, I want to believe Berserk is better. And yes, please leave your comment below.
I haven't read Game of Thrones. I haven't read any George R. Martin. I don't know how much the theme of destiny and the Hand of Fate really plays into it, but that is a major theme of the manga and this anime in particular.
Hey, this has a bunch of cool Hellraiser-style demons. I don't think Game of Thrones has that.
This man, when I first saw the God Hand appear in the comic, I was like, this is Hellraiser.
Yeah, they're Cenobites.
I just always love when I can see something that's so influential as this, then see its influence or what influenced it, like that. There's just something fun to that, of that it constantly gets passed along kind of thing. And he Miura seems like he took a lot from Western influence, not just other Japanese creators too. He was very universal.
It's always fun to see a Japanese creator take a lot of Western influence and then sort of put their own spin on it. Like with the God Hand you mentioned, the thing that you may not understand is that they're basically the four kings, which is that classic trope of four great generals that you have to defeat in order to reach the final boss.
Yeah, it's very. I mean, it's not a shonen fighting series, but the beginning of the story establishes. Well, here are the 5 bosses Guts must face in his journey. Just like Berserk, Game of Thrones will also not be finished. So that's how it's going to work out. I'm not saying anything about the health of the author, but he's clearly not interested anymore.
Well, his problem is he's not working hard enough. He won't finish it. He's like, you know what? Nah,
he did some work on Elden Ring. You know.
Yeah. Hey,
speaking of Berserk,
yes.
If I was George R. R. Martin and I finally got famous and could just be like crazy rich and everyone loves me, why would I sit back down at a desk for 9 months and write a bunch of words in a thing I already got rich off of?
Yeah, it's time to see the world.
Yeah.
Writing's for suckers.
Yes.
I say this as a former writer. For people getting into the manga, I think it's hard to get over the title because honestly it is kind of corny and cheesy. Berserk. And the name of the main character I think people have a lot of problems with. His name is Guts. Now I see people saying, no, it's actually Gatsu. It's like, no, he's Guts.
Yes.
He is named Guts, and it's fine, okay?
Yeah.
And we can get over that. But yeah, there are a few kind of cheesy things because, sometimes words in other languages sound cooler when you don't really know them. And but once you start reading, it's not a big deal.
Nah.
Like, you get used to people calling this man Guts.
it always kind of drove me up the wall whenever I would read old fan translations of the manga back in the good old days, and they would always put in Gatsu, and it would be GATSU, and I'm like, that's weird.
Especially when it's meant to be a borrowed English word, then you write it in English, that never made sense to me in that choice of some localizations.
Miura said he chose this title because it evokes a dark hero with a fanatical thirst for revenge, and I think, hey, that works.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, Puck says the titular word after he sees Guts fight all of these just like corpse demons. He says Berserk after he sees Guts go Berserk. So there's the Berserk from Berserk. It's somewhere in the beginning.
Title drop.
Yeah.
This manga deals with things like destiny, free will, betrayal, and revenge. And it tells the epic tale of Guts, who is a lone swordsman who rises to power under the enigmatic leader of a mercenary group called the Band of the Hawk, who is Griffith. But no spoilers here for the rest of the manga, but the most popular arc, the Golden Age, which is what this anime series adapts, has been adapted another time, like a decade ago. They adapted it again, and it tells a story of Guts' rise and the fall that happens after he's betrayed by Griffith. And that's not a spoiler because that's what the first episode sets up. Like, who is Griffith? Why is Guts in this state? Then we flash back to see the entire story being told.
Yeah, because you meet a one-eyed guy, one eye, one arm, a brand that's bleeding like hell on his neck. How did this happen? And then you find out how it happens in the Golden Age. Yeah.
First episode of this anime is very much a truncated, abridged version of the first arc of the manga, which really just exists to sort of establish the tone and the setting and everything.
Yeah, and there are some fun teases throughout that first arc of the manga that goes on for like 3 books. I forgot how long that first arc goes on, but it's really good. I thought I'd be like, oh, I'm going to suffer through this to get to the good stuff. No, the fights he goes on and the things he does and the teases for the future of the manga are all really cool in that first arc. But it's all truncated to one episode of the anime. And yeah, Miura admits, like, I didn't know what I wanted to do with the character other than the idea that he was out for revenge. So as he was writing those initial chapters, he thought, let's go back in time and see how Guts became this way.
I think for first-time readers, when it was new, I think that was the right move. If he just started with the tree with all of the people hanging in it and his birth, you don't know the character enough to care yet. You know, that's not the best starting place. You need to see the man he becomes to then flash back to his birth,
I was going to say, it's good to start in media res.
Yes, going back to One Piece once again, the anime makes a better move than the manga. The manga starts off with, like, here's the origin story of Luffy. The anime is like, well, no, here's an adventure first, then we're going to flash back to show you the origin story. I think that's a much better way to do it. And
we're just gonna have Nami be right here for no reason.
Exactly. Who is this mysterious girl? So one localization note, the Band of the Hawk can also be known as Band of the Falcon, and honestly it should be, but everyone localized it as Hawk first because it's named after the Millennium Falcon. Miura is a huge Star Wars nerd, but the kanji for Hawk and Falcon are identical. So most localizers in the beginning used Hawk before they knew Falcon was what he intended.
Okay.
I almost want to say, Miura, you hack, but I know that that's a bad thing to say because I'm just like, really?
Hey, he wears his influences on his sleeve, and let's talk about some of them. So obviously, the 1982 film Conan the Barbarian, a huge influence on him. Also, something I was unaware of, the Elric of Melniboné novel series by Michael Moorcock, which apparently the description I heard was these were the Witcher novels before The Witcher existed. And I've added that to my Amazon wish list because there are new digital compilations of those coming out in February of this year.
Wow.
Those novels are also super influential on Dungeons and Dragons, by the way.
Oh, cool.
I've only heard, I've never read the original. The only book of that I read was a short story, tribute story to it by Neil Gaiman, who also was very influenced by that work.
He writes the forewords on those new collections.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So also, Osamu Tezuka's Dororo was Miura's favorite manga series, and he wanted to create a similar world full of dark atmosphere and full of yokai, like demons. So.
Man, I gotta read that Dororo. That's like the big. I've read Adam. I've read Buddha. I've got Princess Knight. I think that's the other one I've got. But that's how fucking prolific Tezuka was. It's like, have you read 5 of these giant series? Well, you haven't read the other 6 that he did that were also huge.
Well, Henry, they made a 2019 anime series that's really good, so you don't have to read nothing.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that anime series. I'd like to get more Tezuka manga myself, but unfortunately, I spent a lot of it on the complete Blackjack collection, which is right behind me right now. So.
I see it behind you. Yeah, I bought 2 volumes of those, and they were expensive. So lots of other inspirations cited by Miura. Here are some of the bigger ones. Star Wars, because Miura was born in 1966, and guess what? It came out in 1977, right?
11 years old.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. Fist of the North Star, the works of Go Nagai, Mad Max. Guts is kind of based on the titular Mad Max of Mad Max.
God, yeah. It's Mad Max starring in Conan the Barbarian. That's what, wow.
And particularly, he cites shoujo manga, which is manga written for girls and young women. So in particular, he was trying to evoke what shoujo manga evokes best, characters feeling powerful emotions. And he cites things like Rosa Versailles and Aim for the Ace as inspirations. And when you read the initial chapters of Berserk, when Puck meets Guts, he's like, oh, these emotions flowing from him. I can't take it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so,
there's an actual scene in this episode that we're going to talk about where, Guts and Griffith stare at each other, and there's just this, what am I feeling right now? And he stares at him, and I'm like, this is a shoujo anime moment here.
Oh, absolutely. And things that are not on the record as inspirations. We talked about Hellraiser. That came out in 1987. He definitely watched Hellraiser and the sequels to get inspiration for the God Hand, which are like the bosses he has to fight. And I think also John Carpenter's The Thing. The demons in this, they really feel like Thing-style Lovecraftian creations.
Oh, yeah.
I believe he was also inspired, artistically anyway, for the demons by Bosch, the painter.
Right, Hieronymus Bosch.
And you can absolutely see MC Escher in every line work he does.
Yeah. Once the dimension opens up, you go to the God Hand's base. They're living in Escher Town, basically.
Yes, yeah.
So he wrote over 300 chapters and illustrated them all with assistance, of course. And to be unfair, 41 volumes over 30 plus years isn't as much as a lot of manga artists put out. So One Piece began serialization in 1997. 25 years ago, there's 101 volumes out. There's 60 more volumes. That's because Miura worked at a slower pace, and also he would go on hiatus a lot starting in the mid-aughts, and they would last a few months up to almost an entire year. So he was taking breaks, but he was also working on other projects, and people were very mad at him for working on these things. So
just like Martin, just like George R.R. Martin.
Exactly.
Wow.
Stop working on that Dark Souls thing. So in the early 2010s, he created a comic series called Gigantomaxia, which was later compiled into one single volume. As of this recording, the 41st and possibly final volume of Berserk was released in Japan in December. No release date for the America yet, but I'm sure it's coming. So that's basically what happened to the manga over the past 32 years.
And so, I would guess at the time of this recording, they don't know. I mean, how can you finish it without him? Unless he had notes that say, here's how to end it if I die or whatever. Like, how can you, it's his story. Like, somebody else could pick it up, but it's like, it doesn't even sound like he has, like, Tolkien had sons who are like, actually, I know, he told me how he'd end the Silmarillion or whatever.
Frank Herbert's kids are writing a billion Dunes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The only thing I could imagine that could possibly end Berserk, quote unquote, if he actually like listed a bunch of notes for how he would end the series, and a bunch of manga artists came together and just like drew scenes of what he had planned and put those together, and was like, there would be commentary of the scenes, like, here's where Guts fights Griffith in the final climatic showdown or whatever. And I think that could be interesting, but outside of that, I couldn't see this manga continuing unless there was like excruciating detail given to his assistants.
Yeah, Devin, I don't know how much of it you read, but have you read as far enough to know, was it close to ending? Did it feel like it was close to the end of the story?
I have in fact read the final chapter, and I have in fact read basically all of it. There's like a few chapters that I don't really remember that much of in the latter parts of like the boat arc, because I kind of skipped around there, unfortunately. But I have read the final chapter, and I will say the final chapter written by Miura feels very, very odd, and because it almost does feel like I don't want to say that there's a finality to it, but certain characters come back, certain characters make returns and show up, and there's sort of a reunion of sorts almost, and it almost does have this strange climactic finality to it almost. And I don't want to spoil it, obviously, but if you have read the final chapter, then you know what I'm talking about. And it just feels weird to know that, yeah, this is the last thing he worked on, and this probably isn't going to get resolved, at least not in the way that he wanted it to.
Yeah, the second to last chapter came out in January of 2021, and then he passed away in May. So even if he survived, that's still like 5 months without new content. And then posthumously, the final chapter came out in September of 2021. So I don't know if this was sudden or if he was in poor health or whatever. It just seems strange that he had a finished chapter, or does it feel like it's unfinished?
No, it feels like a finished chapter. It definitely feels like this is kind of what he had intended, or at least enough things have been set up where certain events happen that it doesn't feel super rushed or anything. It doesn't feel like, oh god, I gotta get to like this next arc real fast. I'm running out of the clock here. But it does feel like he had a plan and he was about to execute on something, which sadly just kind of got cut short, and it just deflates the whole thing almost.
Yeah, that's a real shame, because it feels like we were on the brink of a Berserk renaissance, because we'll talk about the other anime they made, but the 2010s we had 3 new movies. The mid 2010s we had a couple new anime seasons that aren't good. We'll talk about those. And
we'll talk about those.
The hardcover books start being released in 2019. It starts becoming available digitally in 2017. It feels like people are just getting ready to rediscover this series or discover it for the first time, and it feels like he was about to launch into something like newfound fame almost, despite doing this for 30 years.
Well, what I had heard anyway, just from like the grapevine on the internet, is that Miura always had trouble transitioning his art digitally or something like that. Like some parts during his work, he just didn't quite understand how to produce manga at the same pace that he did originally, due to the growing digital landscape of the manga industry. And he only recently started to actually pick up pace there, and that's why manga chapters actually started to come out a bit more regularly past the boat arc. But after that, yeah, it all just kind of we saw what happened. So
yeah, I mean, we only talked a little about his art, and we were like, oh yeah, it's very good. But I think in terms of just technical skill, he is on the same page as like Katsuhiro Otomo, who made Akira, who drew Akira, in terms of just these incredibly often too intricate layouts, these incredible splash pages, just showing you it's like almost supernatural, his ability, especially when you get to moments in the manga, like when the eclipse happens, which is what this entire arc is leading to. There's no spoilers there, of course. And I think an entire chapter is just splash pages of the most horrific things imaginable happening to everybody you love. And they are so just gorgeously, but also horrifically designed, and down to this tiniest detail. He put so much effort into doing this.
One death in particular in that particular scene really fucked me up when I first read it as like a high school student, because I read that I saw that death scene. I was like, oh my god, I won't say who it is, but a certain character I don't want to go in. I won't go that far into it. No, I won't.
It's a very, very violent manga. And it's funny, when I watch the TV series now, I'm sure when I watched it 20 years ago, I was like, wow, this is so violent. Now when I watch it with the manga chapter right by my side, I'm like, well, this is so much more graphic in the manga. There are things they're definitely not showing you. There's so much creative cutting around violence in the anime. And I honestly give them credit for adapting such a violent and dark story for a TV audience.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I will say about this anime in particular is that I think this is the best anime that Berserk has ever had, although that's not saying much, unfortunately. But I will say, at the time, I think that as a teenager, I saw how dark and how violent and how mature, quote unquote, it was. And I thought to myself, wow, this animation is super, super good. And nowadays I look at it and I'm like, there's a lot of still frames being moved, panned across the camera here.
I see the flaws more now as an adult than I did. I would have if I seen this in 2000. Yeah,
it is such a tall order, though, to ask an anime team to replicate that artwork from the manga on a fairly low budget.
Pretty much impossible. I mean, like that was something that held back JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for a long time. Like, they first did OVAs that could do it, and now I think thanks to digital, the show currently adapts it so closely, but that also often involves no movement and just like stills that are just like a panel of the cartoon, of the comic.
We get a technique which is called like postcard memories, this anime technique, which is not used that often anymore, but you still see it, where it's just like a very well drawn illustration that is at a Dutch angle and the camera is like pushing into it or moving away from it or panning across it to sort of just indicate movement. That happens a lot in this anime, especially in this episode.
I guess the other thing to talk about with this anime is, how do you guys feel about Puck as a character? Because I feel like we may as well just address him now.
It's funny, Puck is absent from this anime. So when I watched the anime and the manga started coming out, I was like, oh boy, I can't wait to see what happens next, not knowing that there's so much you have to read before you even get to this arc. You meet Puck almost initially, and I'm like, what the hell? Who is this? This is so off tone for the series. I don't know if I like this character. Now that I'm rereading, I'm like, oh no, Puck is kind of necessary. And Miura even said, like, without Puck, I couldn't write this really dark story. Like, he is the necessary light element of this series. And I think reading it now, I'm thinking also Puck is the point of view character, where Puck is just as horrified by what he's seeing as you are. And you need sort of that perspective as well when going through just these very dark moments in Guts' life and world.
Yeah, I agree. I think Puck is a very needed, like, perspective character who can just say, like, is the world really this bad? Like, no, I can't stand to see this. Please don't do this. Like, at least you know that you're not insane feeling this way, because Guts cannot be your perspective character. Like, he's just so hardened and like hurt by the world. You need a glimmer of hope who can also like turn into a chibi character who's like, ow, my butt. Ow.
Yeah, or like when a head is exploding, he could be freaking out in like a crazy expression or something. Oh, Devin, please.
Yeah. And I will say, I do like that Puck is, a fantasy creature. He's a fairy. He's not like, I think it would be more annoying if there was like a little kid following Guts around going, oh no, what's happening? Get me out of here, Guts.
Yeah. Puck can help Guts as well. He's got like healing abilities, and Puck is one of the two reasons I can't read this in public, because there's, lots of gore and violence, and blood and severed limbs and things. Also, an androgynous naked elf floating around without genitalia, of course, but still, you're going to get some looks.
Get a lot of butt hanging out from old Puck there, yes. Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about the anime of which Puck is not a part. So the full name of this anime is actually Kempu Denki Berserk, or Sword Wind Chronicle Berserk. There's no word in English for the wind that comes off of a sword when you swing it. That's why Japan has a better language than us.
That's cool.
Yes. So this was animated by OLM, Oriental Light and Magic. When I saw this, I was like, who is this? But they probably went out of business, right? I've never heard of them. Of course not. Of course not, because I took a look at what they did. They're the people who do all the Pokemon anime. Yep. In fact, Berserk is something that's way different than what they normally do, which is they normally do kid-focused, merchandise-focused cartoons.
Yeah.
And that's almost everything they do.
It was all, when I saw just the studio listing on this, that was from skimming that, I was like, wait, I remember this from when we did the Pokemon episode. And just I remember that, like, yeah, OLM has been the Pokemon factory for 24 years now. And it's just funny to think now of, like, right around when they were signing their Pokemon deal to work on this video game adaptation, probably last 50 episodes tops, and at the same time they're working on Berserk, and like that was what they I bet there were people in that company that thought, we're getting to adapt Berserk, this is the big deal, like this is going to make us famous.
In fact, Pokemon debuted on Japanese TV 6 months before Berserk did.
Whoa. Yeah. Wow. So same building was making the first Pokemon cartoons and this.
Someone was drawing Pikachu and Nosferatu Zod.
And now I'm just imagining someone is sitting there in like the animation studio being like, dun-da-da, hey, are you drawing Pikachu on the wrong cell there? And then it's just like a picture of Pikachu standing next to Guts or something.
Hey, with the power of cells, you can buy 2 cells and then put them on top of each other to make it your own scene there. Yeah. So more about OLM. Their first anime production that I could find on record was 1995's Wedding Peach, a magical girl series. I know my wife was a fan of that. It's like, I think their thing is they transform into like bridal gowns.
I recall watching a couple episodes here and there in my magical girl viewing days. But yeah, it was like, instead of a sailor suit, it's a magical wedding dress.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And like I said,
Wedding Peach, I recall that show. It very much is not Sailor Moon, which it's not bad, but it is very much a not Sailor Moon.
I only know it because there's a Japanese RPG that was fan translated that made me aware of Wedding Peach. So you can play that if you want. It's been out for like 20 years. And Odd Taxi is the other show they made, which seems different than all of their normal stuff. They make some weird ass show called like Buddy Fight Card Master or something. And my wife and I watched an episode of that for fun over a break, and it's really toyetic. It's like it's even more you are learning the rules for the thing you will buy than Yu-Gi-Oh is.
Wow.
And this anime is directed by Naohito Takahashi. His credits date back to the mid-'80s. One of his first roles was animation director on the very popular anime adaptation of the baseball manga Touch. Which
I've always wanted that series is not. It's weird. The sequel series was like on Crunchyroll, like that they did like the new Next Generation kind of series for Touch, but we never got the original here. I've always wanted to read it because baseball manga underrepresented in official localizations.
I think so. A sports manga in general, I think. So after this, the director, Takahashi, he directed the anime adaptation of the Two Heart dating sim, as well as Steel Angel Kurumi 1 and 2. And I'll tell you what, this was around the era in which I was reviewing anime, getting huge boxes for free, and I started resenting getting free anime after watching Steel Angel Kurumi. And being around in the industry, in quotes, around that time, ADV was putting a lot of money on Steel Angel Kurumi for being a big hit, and I don't know why.
Man. Yeah,
she's a pink-haired robot maid girl with big jubblies.
It was one of those.
You want?
Yeah, it was one of those. Yeah, you want to fuck a robot kind of shows, like. Chobits was one of those. Right. There was a lot of anime about like this robot girl. There's like Mahoromatic, the robot maid.
I watched that show.
That was made by Gainax.
Yeah,
I only watched that show because of Gainax stuff, and even that I was like, by the third episode. When they go to the beach, I was like, all right. I know what the deal is here. I'm good.
Yeah, there was a weird, like, robot-made anime bubble in the early aughts. I don't know what was going on in the world, but we needed robot maids to fuck us, and they did. So moving on, the music is by Susumu Hirasawa. We learned a lot about him in our Millennium Actress podcast. And this is definitely the first place I ever heard his very distinctive music. And it feels like it should be at a place in a series like this, but it makes this anime series feel really more iconic.
Mm-hmm. I've heard people complain about, I've seen some fans online say they don't like the music, especially the OP of the show, but like do they just want death metal for it? Just hard rock and death metal, like really hard guitars? Like I kind of like that it goes against type. And Hirasawa too, like this, I remember this from our Millennium Actress one. This was his first anime. Like he's not like a guy who does anime soundtracks. This made it also really special.
I think he's done like one other anime outside of Berserk and the Satoshi Kon stuff. He doesn't really do anime very much. In fact, the trailer to this set to Hirasawa's Forces is what sold me on the series. It was this really cool trailer Media Blasters did, and I downloaded that from Napster, and I was driving around thinking, yeah, I'm like, guts. Just try to merge.
Hirasawa, he definitely adds this ethereal quality to the soundtrack, I find. Like, especially some of his lighter soundtracks. Like, Forces definitely has a very hard edge to it, but a lot of his lighter music that you'll hear, he kind of just like willowy whispers or calls out over it, and it definitely gives it this almost elven ethereal quality to the whole thing.
Yeah, and he would come back to score the first 2 video games, and I forgot to mention that truly, Americans were first introduced to Berserk through the 2000 Dreamcast game, A Sword of the Berserk Guts' Rage. When this game takes place, I think, after the anime series or like in the middle of the manga. So our first introduction to Guts was this adaptation of something that we didn't even know existed.
Yeah, that was an amazing time for like, because Dreamcast needed anything. Like, there was also like way before Gundam was anything here. One of the first Gundam things I ever played was something set during the like 0079 UC war that is such like a tiny side story.
I played a lot of Dreamcast games, but I didn't really own a lot of Dreamcast games. Hint, hint, wink, wink, because my mom knew a guy. One time when I was looking at the burned CDs that we had, one of them had written on it in black Sharpie marker, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and I wondered, what the hell is that? And that was how I first got exposed to JoJo.
Yeah, the JoJo game was the first thing to really hit in America, too.
Yep, yeah.
And we didn't know what it was, and they didn't want to pay enough money to reskin it, so...
No.
And that Dragon Ball GT game, come to think of it, where Steve Bloom voices Goku.
God,
yes.
That game sucks shit.
And it was worth so much money because nobody wanted it initially. So, Hirasawa came back for the video games, a few of them. The 2016 Musou game was not scored by him. Now, I want to play that. I'm sure it's okay. Yeah. Shiro Sagisu, who does the Evangelion music, of course, he would come back to score the newer animated productions we'll talk about very soon. But the opening to this series that Henry mentioned, Tell Me Why, is performed by the Japanese band Pen Pals. And it is very, very catchy. It sounds like the Japanese version of Pavement is introducing you to the world of Berserk.
No, I feel like I'm watching, 120 minutes. And like the end song of this feels like a Radiohead, like early Radiohead, like from Pablo Honey. I really like that feel to it. Same with the art direction of this show. To me, just screams like, I know it's 1997, but it feels that way too. Like it's like sharp features and lanky characters and this like early kind of almost digital look like that that only really anime from a very small window of time looked that way.
It makes me miss my youth.
Yes, that's what I'm really saying. Yes.
So according to Discogs, they were around from 97 to 2004, at least producing music between those years. And their music is all uploaded to YouTube, and it's pretty fun if you want to check more of it out. It sounds a lot like the opening song. And my big theory is I think Hirasawa wrote Forces to be the opening song, but this band's company swooped in and was like, we'll give you money to put this at the front of Berserk, and they did, which explains a lot, which is why their first release is the same year as Berserk's release.
That sounds like the Japanese music industry to me.
Yeah.
Because it's weird that, in the credits, Hirasawa's Forces, the song with lyrics, is given a separate credit. So I feel like that was supposed to be the intro, and it feels like it would be the more fitting intro, but I still like the Pen Pal song.
I know people don't like it for various reasons, and really the only thing I have against it is that I think it's catchy and everything, but the lyrics are it's Japanese singers singing English lyrics, so the lyrics are a bit off to me. I don't know why. Like, the singer's going, tell me why, tell me what you are, and I'm just thinking, okay, are you talking about the world? Like, are you looking at this blood and death and horrible stuff going on and going, tell me, why is it like this?
Yeah, also the ending song is all sung in English, but I mean, hey, you try singing in Japanese phonetically, then ask a Japanese person how awful you sound.
That's true, yeah. Your lyrics enough. Really suck. Yeah.
And speaking of the ending song, Waiting So Long, performed by Silver Fins, another Japanese band, and no real English language information about this band on the English language internet, but there's a ton ton of their music on YouTube as well. I feel like they're like apples in stereo or something. But judge for yourself. Look them up on YouTube. And they've been defunct as of the late 90s. They were like a side project of some other Japanese band that I've never heard of. So yeah, these two bands weren't big bands.
Apples in the Stereo is a great comparison and a positive one because I love that band.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of like the Pillows, where the Pillows are this just tiny band that Americans love because of one anime series. And when they come here like every 20 years, they're like, people care?
Yeah. Yeah, when me and you, Bob, saw them live, they're like, it's our first time here in 16 years. Wow, thanks, guys. Like, I don't think they understood.
It kind of reminds me of how like Mr. Big is like super popular in Japan. I guess the inverse is true as well.
So I mentioned earlier when I first heard about this series, there were, rumors about it like, oh, it's just so fucked up. They canceled it. They didn't let them make 26. It's just the most darkest, most horrific anime ever. Well, it only lasted a single season on purpose because they set out to adapt the most popular arc of the manga at that time, which had just wrapped up like less than a year ago, and they did. And when it ended, there wasn't enough manga left to adapt. They couldn't go anywhere. So they're like, the part of Berserk you like the most that just ended? Well, here's the animated version of it. And that's why when I watched this back in the aughts before the manga was available, people were like, that ending is such a ripoff because it is the end of Guts' backstory that you can later keep reading the manga to learn where he is now. But the anime, if that's all you have, it's just like, well, what happens now?
Yeah, it's so funny to think it's like, oh yeah, this series is setting up the journey, the epic journey that your major character is going to go on, and that's where it ends. It's like, the epic journey begins, but not for you if you wanted to watch this in motion anymore.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, all the manga's available in English now, but back in the early aughts, it was just like, well, what do I do? Like, how do I learn more about Guts and his rage? But that's not it for Berserk adaptations, because in the early 2010s, Studio 4C released a trilogy of films adapting the exact same story this anime series we're talking about today is adapting. So there are 3 films released in the early 2010s that cover the Golden Age arc. Now, Devin, have you seen these? I heard some polarizing things, but nothing as negative as the later anime they made.
Okay, I haven't actually seen the movies because at the end of the day, I was like, well, I kind of don't really want to get super into Berserk in case it ends, because then I want to like go through all of it in one like big chunk. But then, of course, it happened. Miura died. So then I started to like binge it more, and I didn't get a chance to really watch the movies, unfortunately. But from what I understand, the movies are fine. They just kind of they sort of truncate the plot a bit, and the CGI is a bit distracting, but not as bad as the 2016 anime.
Part of Miura's work that makes it very challenging to adapt is he loves, like I said earlier, these just giant splash pages of wars with all of these men on horseback just clashing, people climbing up the towers of these castles, just in like a Where's Waldo scene, just unfolding in front of you. And it is so hard to ask an entire team to do that, and especially if they're not very good with CGI. And that would be the 2016 series, which actually covers new ground. They're finally adapting new stuff. Unfortunately, it is shockingly bad in terms of the animation. Like, I was willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. Like, I realize it's probably kind of clumsy. No, it's shockingly amateurish, and what a shame that we finally get more Berserk, but it comes in that form.
It was one of the first Japanese animated series that I saw go viral negatively in that way, of that it was shared of like, this is a real scene from the show. Look at it, and it would get videos, tons of popular videos like, everything wrong with this Berserk show. Here's why Berserk sucks. Like, yeah, it was. Yeah. But it sounds like it was very deserved and not just like people being negative online about something.
I mean, I kind of understand the logic behind here in that Miura likes to draw very detailed characters. He likes to draw very detailed scenes. And so the idea is, well, if we just make a really, really detailed model in a CG show, then we can just, animate that model and reuse it all the time. So on that logic, it kind of makes sense. Yeah. But the problem is that if you are a CG animator in Japan, you're probably not going to be working on movies or, hell, TV animation. You're going to be working at like Square Enix making the next trailer to the next Final Fantasy XIV expansion.
Yeah, I think maybe the skill level in general of the CG animators in Japan has grown a lot more in the last like 5-6 years since that series debuted. Maybe they'd do a better season if they were to do a new one.
I mean, there are better ways to do it because I really like Demon Slayer, the anime series, which is traditional animation, but there is CGI assistance throughout, and you can barely tell. Sometimes it even fools me. Like, was that like a CGI scene, or was that traditional, or was that just assisted through like character modeling? I don't know. And
Plus, there are also anime out there like Beastars, which I think that series looked good.
Yeah.
There are good CGI anime series. This was not one of them. And yeah, there's no other news about future Berserk adaptations. It's been 5 years since the last one. Anything else we need to talk about?
I mean, yeah, just how much it like I said, it influenced all these games. Like, I mean, you know, we all saw in America, you probably heard of Cloud before you heard of Guts, you know. Oh, yes, Devin?
Fun thing I actually want to mention here. Yeah, I read Berserk before I ever played Final Fantasy VII. And the fun little trick I think it does here is when I saw Cloud and I saw he had the huge Buster Sword and I saw the back story of him like talking to Tifa and they're on top of that like little thing and he's talking about his dreams of becoming a soldier. I thought that his backstory was going to be similar to Guts's, that he was going to like get an adult sword as a child and that he would just grow along with the sword. And that's why he wields like a giant sword similar to Guts, which as we learn a bit later, that's not exactly the case, but I think that's actually the trick that game is trying to pull with you.
Sephiroth and Griffith have more than a little in common too, you know. So,
oh yeah, they're both pretty silver-haired men.
Kentaro Miura did not invent giant swords, but if you see a Japanese thing and the guy has a giant sword, they're ripping off Berserk, which is fine.
Yes, yeah, it's fine because he ripped off everybody else, so you can rip them off.
In Dark Souls, it makes perfect sense that George R.R. Martin is working on the latest Souls game, Elden Ring, which is out now by the time you're listening to this, because it's very much his works are very Berserky. The director of the Souls series obviously loves Berserk, and you see a lot of Berserk elements in his series as well.
Like straight up references, like very direct ones. I saw explained. Like when I first saw the Behelit, I've never said it out loud. The Behelit in the thing, I was like,
Baelit.
I
thought it was pronounced Baelit.
Well, I trust you.
That's how the dub actors say it, anyways.
When I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's like an item in Dark Souls that I wouldn't read the wiki page on.
I'll just put it on. Why am I dying?
It's like I picked it up, whatever. Yeah.
I mean, the most fun Berserk reference that I know of is actually Devil May Cry, where if you look at the red orbs, they kind of look like Baelits, and the joke is Dante, this cool, awesome, super-powered hero guy, is just eating them like candy. Like, that's kind of the joke.
Yeah, Dante is very gutsy, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Anything else we need to talk about?
And my favorite Souls game is actually Demon's Souls, which that is more than Dark Souls even, I think, really the Berserk game, because that game really has the tone of Berserk, especially in, like, the story and how it's a story about a king who kind of makes a barter with a being way more powerful than he is and kind of gets fucked up and destroys his entire country because of it, which is a very Berserk story.
And you can do your strength build with the double-handed Zweihander, which is a good way to go.
That's how I play all Souls games.
To become Guts.
Exactly. I unironically play every single Souls game with just a strength two-handed greatsword build. Just because that's how I love those games. Man,
now I'm more like Bazoosa in the case because I'm more of a big axe liker.
He's kind of like a Onion Knight boy. Bazuzo.
Yeah, Bazuzo.
We'll talk about him soon. But yes, we're going to take a quick break. But put your glasses on. When we come back, we'll talk about the Berserk episode, The Band of the Hawk. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the break for our What a Cartoon episode all about Berserk. I am one of your hosts, Bob Mackey, feeling no shame about shape, as always. Who is here with me today?
Hey, it's again Henry. Got my glasses on.
He's ready.
Yep.
just like Guts told him. And yes, this episode is brought to you by one of our premium patrons, Devin. If you want to be cool like Devin and get all these episodes 1 week at a time and ad-free and all kinds of extra stuff on top of that, please go to patreon.com/talkingsimpsons, because $5 a month will get you just that, but also access to everything behind the $5 paywall. That is over 100 bonus podcasts that you haven't heard if you're not a patron, and you'll get regular access as well to our monthly episodes of both Talking Futurama and Talking of the Hill, our Futurama and King of the Hill monthly regular Patreon podcasts. We also have a $10 level as well. If you sign up for that, you get only $5 stuff naturally, but also access to one Megalon podcast once a month, only for patrons of that level or higher. And what is that, Henry?
Bob is talking about the What a Cartoon Movie podcast. Now, on this free feed, you see that you have the regular podcast each month, and then you also get the preview of our chat about a different animated feature film, super in-depth. Well, if you were at the $10 level, you get all the $5 things Bob mentioned, and you get to hear the full version of What a Cartoon Movie. This month in March, we're going to be covering the Disney Golden Age classic Pinocchio. The month before that, we went super deep into South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut, and a giant back catalog. In addition to that, over 3 years worth. At my estimations, it's over 220 hours of exclusive premium podcast about animated feature films, in addition to all the $5 things Bob just mentioned. It's all at your fingertips at $10 a month at patreon.com/talkingsimpsons.
And if you've never signed up for Patreon before, it's so easy to do. And once you sign up, you're given access to a code. You have access to that code at all times. You just drop that code into whatever you use to listen to podcasts. And that way you can download all of our bonus podcasts alongside your free podcast as part of your podcasting lifestyle. And there is a Patreon app for any smart device you might have, so you can download our bonus podcast that way as well. Either way you do it, it's so easy to access all the bonus content waiting for you at patreon.com/talkingsimpsons. That's it for this break. We'll let you get to our discussion of the big bad man with the big bad sword as we talk all about Berserk.
Looking back, morning comes, don't find your face in your grass.
So we're back to talk about the Band of the Hawk, or the Band of the Falcon if you prefer, but they say Hawk in this, so I'm saying Hawk.
I think it's Hawk in the comic too. I think that's the general localization. Like you said, it's to protect them. Though I guess if I was coming at this with the mindset I have in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I'd be like, I don't give a shit what these localizations say. This character's AC/DC.
I think it's more that they just didn't know, because George Lucas doesn't own the word Falcon.
Yeah, you know what? You're right.
Yeah. Screw that guy.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, as we talked about before, it's just a confusion with the kanji.
Yeah. But I mean, they're saving a lot of money up front on this opening, because unlike other openings, it's not 90 seconds, because we have 30 seconds of this. We're pulling out from this piece of art with the this demonic hand holding the Beyblade. And a lot of talk about, man has no control over their free will in this world. And a lot of the story, or the main theme of the story, is like Guts should not be alive.
Yes.
These evil demons are playing in the world of man, and they can control everyone's destiny. And Guts from birth should have just been dead, but he refuses to die. And he's the one man who will gain control of his free will.
In that first storyline that precedes Golden Age, just like so many great scenes of like a demon or somebody just saying to him like, hey, that's good for a human, but you can only do so much, and why? And all these other people take the easy route in life, and they just sell their soul or sacrifice something to become powerful. And Guts ain't doing that, man. He's that his will is and it's so easy to like. I've played enough role playing games with people who say like, no, my guy is like the toughest guy, and he never quits, and he's got so much will. And it's like, it's so easy to say that about the character you make up. You earn that by displaying it in amazing, like, page after page of great storytelling about a character.
And he earns the right to be this much of a badass.
I think what really sells Guts on being a badass is that Miura is just very good at drawing a very intimidating, very scary looking monster like you mentioned that he was inspired by Go Nagai, and there's definitely a lot of Devil Man in Berserk as well.
Oh yeah. Like so many horrible freaks that represent like the power structure around you, and Go Nagai too. Like Go Nagai's a little hornier than Miura is, I would say.
It's nice to see these themes because, you know, Christianity is not very big in Japan, but it's nice that even Miura realizes, like, oh yeah, the church is evil.
Yes, yeah.
It's full of demons.
That's what I love. In so many Souls games are like, well, and of course you've got to kill the Pope. Like that's how the Catholic Church especially in this seems to be like just like, oh yeah, just venal little men who go like, well, I guess we do have to kill that woman. Like,
creepy little virgins who serve demons.
Yes,
that's what they are.
So good.
But yeah, this opening is very low budget. There's very little actual animation in it, and a lot of it is just like 20 seconds of Guts standing on a cliff with his cape billowing in the wind. And I like a lot of fantasy anime. I feel like 20% of any anime opening in that genre is characters on a cliff with their capes billowing, especially Slayers.
Yes. Yeah, I think I'm gonna steal this from what I remember hearing Eye Patch Wolf say about it, but it's like the animation is limited, but like they have such a great one like layout because they can take from the page, like right off the page, great layout that looks good in little motion, and also their background artists, like, and even on this first shot of the hand holding the Bailet is just so amazing looking. Like it's just a great still image. Like if it does its job right, you're not thinking like, boy, they're going to just zoom in on this one image for 30 seconds in this cartoon, in this animated thing.
And most of the time, you'll just skip that anyways.
Yeah.
Because you've seen it.
Yeah.
But yes, Guts is the only character featured in this opening as well, which I found odd. But hey, it's his story. I just feel like they didn't have a lot of time or money. And again, my forces theory makes me think that opening had to be scrapped, that sequence had to be scrapped, whatever point of production it was in, and this one had to be made for the Pen Pals song, which is why it's only a minute long.
Yeah, but hey, they need all the money they can get for their budget. If the Pen Pals record producers are offering up the bucks, like OLM would be fools not to take it.
They show that burning flower a lot too.
Someone's proud of that flower.
I mean, it looks nice, and hey, it's a metaphor for like beauty lost to chaos and death. It works good, you know. Yeah.
So this episode opens with what I've said before, the postcard memory, which was a technique founded by this guy named Dezaki, who I believe he really pioneered this in that boxing anime, Ashita no Joe.
Yes, Tomorrow's Joe. Yeah, we talked. He was the director of Frosty the Snowman, which did
You're
not
totally
have
right.
that didn't have any postcard memories in it, but yes,
it should have had like Santa punching that magician, a postcard memory of that.
Yeah, man, when
just hyper detailed. Shakes the camera, zooms out away from it.
He hadn't perfected it just yet, but yeah.
This postcard memory is depicting this castle gate being broken down, and you can see the animators are in a bind. We have to draw an entire army invading this castle, fighting an entire occupying army. What the hell?
Feet.
Yeah. Yes.
Draw feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of guys on horseback too. They have a lot of horse workarounds in this anime.
It feels like horses are hard to draw, but boy, Miura is so good at drawing horses in many states, especially chopped in half. It's like, there goes the horse's head.
I mean, not the listeners can't see this, but the picture from Berserk you have behind you, Bob, for your background is like, it's him with a giant sword in the rain, and like you can see the singular droplets like flying off his sword. It's like, how could anybody animate that? But in Ghibli at its highest budget, in Mononoke could handle that, but pretty much no other thing could do it.
And it would take them years.
Yes.
So this gate's broken down, and the leader of his infantry is telling all of his men, go find the general, kill him, you'll get a huge reward. So he's obviously hired mercenaries to help him liberate this castle or occupy this castle.
Yeah, I had one thought about the lyrics on the opening that I liked how it matched up when they say, even mother will show you another way. That's over the tree where Guts was born. Like I was like, oh, that's cool imagery to go along with the song.
Yeah, they don't show you that part of his backstory, I don't think, or maybe they allude to it. But yeah, Guts is basically born from a corpse. He just falls out of a corpse.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but I think there's like one scene where Guts is like, yeah, I was born from like a corpse. He tells that to Griffith, I think, at some point. But other than that, no, they don't really show it.
The manga shows you everything.
Everything. Yeah.
And we see a ton of soldiers falling in battle against this giant brute named Bazuso, who's got this huge war axe. And Miura is really good at drawing both like hulking, horrifying demons and just these giant men who are frankly too large to be human.
Impossible. Like guys who are like Andre the Giant would like be looking up at them. These like impossible, huge creatures. Like, yeah, it's every group that Guts will face has at least one giant man, like impossibly huge guy. And this guy's like the Juggernaut as well, because he's like smooth too. Like, it's just a scary gray knight who fights bears.
And as you said, Devin, a lot of these huge brutes are like, what's this guy gonna do? Oh, one soldier? He's just a little guy. And
how is he doing this? How is he doing this?
Yeah, if there was the internet, people would know. But no one hears word of Guts in this world. He's just a mercenary.
I mean, you say that, but then I also think back to Yakuza, which is like Kiryu is like the most powerful dude in all of Japan, and people are still like, "Hey, I bet I could take this guy." Runs up to him.
In comics,
nobody learns.
In comics, I think that too, where a guy's like, "Hey, what if I was the guy to kill Batman? He can't dodge every bullet." It's
exactly. Yeah, there's one point in the manga where all of these archers have their crossbows drawn on Guts, and the leader's like, "You are all armed. Just shoot at him." And then Guts just swings it. Guts blocks all the arrows with his sword, and then cuts all of the archers in half.
Yep. Yeah. It's like your life is forfeit. You really should have just ran.
Doesn't matter how many of you there are, he will not die. Yeah, the soldiers are afraid of Bazuso because they've heard about him, unlike Guts, where he's the 30-man slayer and the bear slaughterer. Bazuso has a reputation.
Meanwhile, Guts is like this little kid, or he's like 14 or something.
I feel like, he's like a younger teen in this, because in the manga, when you learn about Guts and his origins after the first arc, it like skips forwards like 2 or 3 years in time every time you see him until he's like a younger man.
Bazuso is one of those characters who is mysteriously kind of popular, even though he really only shows up in like the one chapter and this one episode of the anime. Like, I swear I've seen him referenced a lot in like video games that take inspiration from Berserk.
Yeah, he does look like the Onion Knight guy in Dark Souls. He has a really cool armor and a kind of a cool look to him. And
I've also seen enemies that look like him in like Dragon Guard.
Yes, for sure. I think Dragon Guard for sure pulls from Berserk.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Speaking of people who look like people who look like things.
It's the Pumpkin Man.
He actually is. Yeah. No, I am the knight who's giving people orders, a very proper knight, especially when he takes his helmet off. I think he's supposed to be Freddie Mercury, don't you? Like, I think it's a Freddie Mercury. If you look what Freddie Mercury looked like in 1989 or 90, like that's what he looks like. I
think he's supposed to be more of like a fancy man, unlike all the scum he hired.
Like Freddie Mercury.
I think he's just supposed to be like your generic fop.
Yes, that's a general thing that goes through the series too, right? That like knights are, they're just these like rich jerks who boss people around. They're not like, all amazing fighters or something.
Yeah, and all these mercenaries are just meant to be used and thrown away by, the priesthood or, landowners. They're just like, they don't even consider them people. It's like, I'll pay you to die, basically.
Yeah. Just like the real Middle Ages.
Yeah, in a way, it is very much depicting just the horrors of life in that time period.
Yeah, none of this romanticism of like a King Arthur bullshit like that. It's like, oh, do you know how hard it would be to be anybody but the king? Like,
your station in life is decided from birth, so you better be happy with it.
Yeah.
So we are doing an anime, and guess what, guys? We got clips of this dub, which is a very of the time anime dub, but I still enjoy it. So in our first clip here, Guts steps in to fight Bazuso.
Quit your dawdling, you cowards! Defeat him and earn the bounty!
He's talking nonsense.
He isn't paying that much.
Yeah, why don't you do it yourself?
Huh? Who is that?
He's still a kid.
Look at the size of that sword. Does that runt actually think he's gonna swing that thing around?
It's just for looks. He's gonna be slaughtered.
But he has no experience.
Hey, kid. Do you really want to fight with me? I see you've got some balls, but you're gonna regret it when I chop your head off with my axe. Either way, it's pathetic that a kid like you is permitted to fight on the battlefield. There seems to be a shortage of soldiers in your army. Are all the men cowards?
By the way, he's wearing a helmet. It's not bad audio quality.
Yeah, there's no design. I think it's also like kind of a good out by Miura in his original design of like, why draw a face on this guy? Like he's only here to be the first impressive kill that Guts gets, you know.
And it's very Berserk like for the enemy to be like, what's this guy gonna do? He'll do nothing. I'm unstoppable.
That sword couldn't possibly even be used. Come on.
Yes. But Guts is much different than what we saw in the first episode. So he's younger. The first episode ends with basically him entering this scene. So he's much younger. He has 2 functioning arms and he has both eyes. In the present of the story, Guts is missing an eye and one of his hands is gone from the wrist down. He's got a cool like robo hand that can drop down and has like a Mega Man style cannon inside.
Oh, that cannon's so cool.
Don't know how that works, but it's really cool.
Yeah, it really doesn't make any sense, which slight spoilers for the manga here, but magic is introduced and he's given the robo hand before magic is introduced into the series. So yeah, it's kind of nuts that thing exists.
Yeah, it's a big surprise in the early like the first chapter of the manga when you think he's about to die and his basically hand drops down to reveal a cannon inside of his arm that he uses to shoot the Snake Man. And before magic is into the comic, he can still grab things with his prosthetic hand. There's no reason why, but he can still grab a giant sword with it.
I think the implication is that he has like a magnet inside of it and that like lets it connect to the metal in his sword, I think.
Sure.
Well, you can see that even when his hand is disabled, he can just use his wrist and his teeth to push his sword into people. So I feel like One Piece, Zoro, his 3-sword fighting style, one of the swords is in his teeth. That does feel like Berserk inspired.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's some other reference that I'm missing here.
You know, fun fact about that, actually, Guts, his dub actor in this is the same dub voice actor of Zolo in the 4Kids dub of One Piece.
That poor man. I know the director for this dub is Michael Sinter-Nicholas, the voice of, is it Dean Venture?
Yeah, he's Dean.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's he directs dubs to this day. He's a very busy, it's like Dean is like a side thing for him. He's really just a dub director on stuff.
He's also the main boy character in Your Name, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
Wow.
I never heard the dub of that.
That's
it's okay. It's all right.
So, you know, another thing that feels like it was influenced by this that just hit me when we talk about, you know, mercenaries working for the army, and the mercenaries are like, it focuses on this young group of Lost Boys kind of thing, even. Reminds me of Metal Gear Solid a bit, and Outer Heaven to a good degree, like, and not to mention like an augmented man as well, which is more like the Gray Fox.
Yeah,
but
well, like in Metal Gear Solid 5, he's got a robo hand, right?
Oh yeah,
but that's
right.
Big Boss.
Oh yeah.
Well, Poison Snake. Let's just say Poison Snake.
Yeah, Venom Snake. Yeah, Venom Snake.
Who knows who he is?
Yeah.
But Bezuzo is really taken aback by Guts, who rushes at him, and he keeps like chopping at his war axe. So yeah, everyone underestimates Guts immediately, and they shouldn't.
Yeah, this is where having the pages open did damage watching this to me, because like, on the page, obviously, when he doesn't have to animate it, like it's a different thing. But it's like he moves so fast that it's like in one panel you're seeing like 5 parries happen at once, like clang, 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 clang. And here it's like just one hit and then the second hit and then one hit and then just repeat, cycle it like 3 times. It doesn't look as cool. Like there's no way they can do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. The unfortunate thing about this anime, I think, is that for all the limited animation, there really isn't any Sakuga to like compensate for that.
Yeah,
Not really, no. They really don't have the money. From what I heard, this aired like very, very late too. Like it was like a 2 a.m. show or something like that.
Well, I mean, even with all the blood, the blood that they get in this is not like your not your big time head exploding OVAs that we saw as kids, but it is still a lot of blood.
It's really like Evil Dead, like poof, like a geyser just bursts out of people.
But also,
Quentin Tarantino style.
Also something that I wish they'd kept that was not adapted from the pages. I like how Guts is bartering with the knight before he attacks him. He's like, come on, give me 10. He's like 7 and no more.
Is that only in the manga? That
yeah,
scene?
yeah.
Okay,
It's not in the show.
Guts
yeah.
talks a lot more before he fights Bazuso in the manga.
Yeah, I like the haggling. It shows that, like, for Guts, this is all like he's like, well, look, I got to make money, dude. Give me the coins. I'll fight the unique boss fight in this encounter here.
And the way this battle shakes out is that Guts blocks the swing of this war axe with his sword, and it splinters the blade of the axe.
Which, like, that's a bit, like, that already shows you're crazy strong.
Yeah.
Already, yeah.
And there's sort of like a very anime moment where they're both taking swings at each other. So Bazuso takes a swing at Guts' head with his war axe, while Guts is taking a swing at Bazuso's midsection. The war axe shatters on Guts' helmet because Guts cracked the blade, and his side is just pierced with Guts' sword, and just blood gushes out of it, just a fountain of blood shooting out of him.
Yeah, the way that's really good slow motion, and it's also like it works on so many levels, just as it does on the comic page of just that. It shows it's a great reveal of his face. So you've had the obscure face of your lead character, and him almost getting his head cut off. It reveals his face. You're like, wow, what a cool guy. And then also it shows in slow motion that, like, him breaking the axe saved him, or, like, you can think, was that his plan the whole time? And then later it can be brought up as, like, you almost died. Like, you looked pretty cool, but you actually almost got killed right then, you know?
And the manga really shows how ruthless he is, because after he cuts into the side of this guy, the guy's like on his back, and Guts brings another swing down on his head, just splits his head open.
Yes.
So he's not fucking around.
Which on the comic page is like full on, like, just squish, splat.
Yeah,
like,
eyes blasting out of the skull.
In the anime, anyway, Bazuzo does go mercy before Guts, finishes him off.
Yeah, and all you see, it's very creative how they get around showing all this graphic violence. You rarely see the actual, like, bottoms of things that are severed off, and you often see just, like, blood dripping down from a wound that's off the screen.
Right, yeah. Well, I think also, not to get too much into, like, depressing real life stuff, but in between the time that was drawn in the comic and when this anime series came out, there was a lot more sensitivity to portrayals of decapitation and dismemberment in lots of Japanese media. So it was not the time. Like, I was thinking of that with in his dream later, he dreams of a character who had his head basically chopped off, but that's not how it's portrayed in the dream sequence in this. It's just a general blood spray out of the chest.
They had a real challenge in front of them for this very violent manga. But yeah, the slow pan up Guts, his sword is covered in blood, and we get a scene that we don't have in the manga, I believe, which is we see Griffith, we see the Baelites hanging from his neck, and we see other members of the Band of the Hawk who are with him, who will meet soon. Actually, I think this is in the manga, but there's more of it in the anime.
You're right. The big difference I noted is that there's no Baelites in the scene. They added it, which I think that is better foreshadowing, which when you're doing a deadline-driven comic, you can't do the kind of foreshadowing that an adaptation a decade later can handle, or almost a decade later can handle better. Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me of how in the JoJo anime in part 2 of it, they put the star birthmark on Joseph's neck.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Like, that was a way smarter thing to do. That, like, obviously, these guys they're making it up as they go along. They're not setting it up. Like, it's same with, like, Lost was making up everything it did at all times. They had no big plan, which you can't blame them. Like, but yeah.
So yeah, the boys on Griffith's side kind of razz him, like, oh, do you think he's stronger than you? He could be. He seems pretty strong.
That Corcus is always stirring up shit, that guy.
Yeah.
Man. What a jerk.
He's a real jerk. He'll get what's coming to him. And Griffith is like, he really does. And Griffith is pretty pragmatic. He's like, no, let's evacuate. And it's said later in the story that these guys are so strong, Griffith's forces are so strong, that they held this castle for 3 months, and people thought they'd hold it for 3 days before all of their men died.
Yeah, they say that in the anime they sort of do that as well. They there is like a voiceover where they're just like, all right, let's retreat. Yeah, well, they said that we were only going to hold this for 3 days. Yeah, well, we held it for 3 months, so nuts to them.
And the only thing that broke them was killing Bazuso. Like, they probably would have if that guy didn't go out, they probably would have kept the place at least another day or so. Like, yeah, in wrestling storyline, that's like, well, you want to put Guts over, but you want the other guys to not look like losers too, so they have to keep their heat, as they would say in wrestling. So that's why you have this great line of saying like, well, we were only supposed to keep it for 3 days, so actually we're pretty badass.
we still won in a way.
Yeah, in a way.
If you look at Griffith's helmet that he wears in this scene and in a later scene where we see him fight, are either of you aware of a movie called Phantom of the Paradise?
Yes.
Wow. Yep. I see it. Yeah.
I can't believe I didn't realize that until now.
You are so right.
Interesting. So that's another inspiration.
That is just the same helmet as the Phantom from that movie, or the Phantom from that movie wore that helmet, I believe. Not the it was like an evil businessman who was played by, I can't remember the guy's name. He played the Penguin in Batman the Animated Series.
Oh yeah, I mean he was the Richard Williams.
Williams. Yeah.
I'm looking at this, and it's absolutely Griffith's helmet in that movie.
Just like Streets of Fire, Japan appreciates these cult movies that America just completely rejected. Yeah.
So the battle is over, and we see the black silhouettes of the aftermath.
The red, that looks so good. I mean, and that's way cheaper than drawing a bunch of people going through wreckage, but it's just an amazing shot.
It's basically them replicating a panel from the manga, but then they're just like pulling out from it. A lot of things, one piece of art being zoomed in or pulled out from, or just like different cuts on that same piece of art. And Guts is counting his money. He's even like biting the coins to make sure they're real. And this leader of this infantry really wants Guts to work for them full time. And like any good boss, he immediately devalues him. He's like, that was probably a fluke, Guts, but hey, we still want you on our side. We'll triple your salary.
We'll take an interest in you. You can be my intern. I think you got a lot to learn here, kid. Yeah.
I want to ask, actually, where does that whole biting coin thing come from? Because, was there, a common thing where you would put, is it to tell if it's wood? It's painted
if it's
wood or
painted and
that?
fake, it's the saying, don't take no wooden nickels. That's why guys bite on it, because if it was, you would know it was wood and not metal when you bit into it, or flimsier metal, and it would bend. I believe that is where it comes from.
And it just kind of shows just what an awful place this world is. It's like the money you get might even be fake.
Yeah.
There's no central banking institution or anything.
There's no morality that drives anyone, and it's like that's why. I think it's even better, again, Puck's not in this, but that's even better than this, magical pixie type character also believes in but it's not all bad. In every experience you see of the adult world that Guts exists in is no, everybody would stab everyone else in the back at all times and do the worst possible thing they could, and you can just pay for it. You're here's $5. I'm going to do an awful thing to somebody. Okay.
We're
thanks.
barely above animals in our morality.
If that, and it's no, even those wolves that Guts fights off, those wolves are better to their kin than his was in his wolf pack.
Well, we'll get to that very soon.
Yeah.
And there's some translation differences I've noted in the manga and the anime that makes me think the anime, they might have not even gotten scripts, and we're just translating the spoken dialogue, because there's a few differences that tell me that. One of them is in the dub, the leader of this infantry is saying, he's promising Guts all of this stuff, like more money, and he says you can even become a ranked warrior. And in the manga, he says Guts can become a squire, which is apprentice to a knight. So maybe they didn't have the right term for that. They didn't have the context for knowing what the spoken word was, but that's what's happening in the manga. He's making a promise to Guts to become a squire.
Squire makes way more sense than ranked warrior. I think that maybe also shows localization and times change. Also, maybe I think Media Blasters was one of those more of lip flap counter types who are just no, we got to count them. I don't care what would be more accurate. This needs to be this many syllables.
And the boss even goes on to say, any mere mercenary would love this. Again, just insulting him.
Yeah, but see, Guts knows, just like Miura himself, be a freelancer. Don't work for a company.
But in our next clip, Guts rejects this job offer.
Our contract expired today, didn't it? Seems the fighting is over around here.
Wait a minute. I will secure your position and income as well. You won't need to put yourself in danger as a grunt during the war.
Don't touch me! Don't you ever touch me.
So, some backstory on Guts that is not fun to talk about is that basically he fell out of the body of a dead pregnant woman who was hung from a tree. Some other mercenaries found him, like basically a woman who had lost her mind found him, and her partner let her keep the baby because it made her happy. She dies of the plague. Guts is raised by this extremely violent, abusive drunk who later sells him to an adult man as a sex slave. Guts kills that man and his adoptive father, and that's why he has PTSD, because he was sexually assaulted as a child. He doesn't want people to touch him.
With the approval of his father figure,
Yes.
who hated him and wished he was dead and not his wife. Yeah, or the boy's body. It's heavy.
It's the darkest backstory ever.
Yeah. And that's why Guts doesn't want anyone to touch him. Like, it's a very realistic, before everything's about trauma now. And it's just like, oh, this Marvel movie's about trauma. That's all that stuff.
And Lion King 2 are the biggest things about trauma.
That's the thing. Like, before it became, a marketing phrase and stuff, like, this stuff was about it. Like, this is I think it is like a mature, for its subject matter, a mature portrayal of someone dealing with that kind of traumatic life event.
Yeah, and I just read that part of the manga again. Definitely not drawn to titillate the reader.
No.
It's supposed to be horrific.
Yeah, and I mentioned this before, but this is Guts has a trigger. Like our protagonist of this cool action, supposedly self-insert power fantasy story. He has a trigger, and it's not like portrayed as something cool and brooding that he has to learn to get over. It's like literally fucking him up inside.
Yeah, just like any casual touch, like, don't touch me. Like, just, he doesn't seem cool. He doesn't it's not meant to make him look cool. Like, it's just an online word, like based or biased or whatever. It's just like the word trigger or whatever. But yes, it's actually in the literal sense.
It's actually real.
Yes. Yeah.
And and a lot of the series is him learning to get closer to people. Of course, Casca, who we'll meet soon. A lot of it is like learning to love other people, and Puck is rooting for him in the present to become to learn to love again and not be just enveloped in hate and rage and revenge. So Guts walks off on his own. He's leaving this asshole behind who wanted to give him a raise. We see some ruins in the foreground, just some hints of the history of the world. There's like fallen kingdoms. None of what they're doing matters, really, is what that's saying. Like, whoever you helped, they're gonna die and their kingdom will fall, and the men you killed, it didn't matter in the first place.
Other works would have wanted you to know, this is two warring armies. Who's good and who's bad? Like that. That doesn't matter. There is no morality to the fight you just saw. It's like one side had employed Guts, the other side employed the Band of the Hawk. Like nobody says we need to take this because it will save these people or whatever. Yeah,
there's nothing noble.
This episode does not begin with a narrator going the kingdom of Marda fought against the evil empire of Marda, and they are warring for the crystal of Vada.
Yep.
Yeah, it takes place in I think they call it Midland, but it's not very important.
Yeah.
Because the politics aren't really that important either. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the politics definitely aren't that important either. Actually, you mentioned we were talking about Satoshi Kon a bit back there, and it just reminded me that you mentioned in your Millennium Actors podcast, British voice actors kind of sound odd to you. And I do think that if the dub actors in this were English or spoke with a British accent, that would actually kind of fit a bit better in this setting.
That's a good point.
Although, if I had to guess what language these characters are actually speaking, they'd probably be speaking Low German, I had to guess.
Yeah, it does seem more Germanic than, from an American standpoint. If you see sword and sorcery stuff, you think, Arthurian or English accents. But even though Germany or Germanic style would fit it more, perhaps.
If they were speaking English, it'd be like the English Chaucer used, which is absolutely meaningless. You need to sit down and stare at every word.
But, in the Lord of the Rings series, or at least the Peter Jackson adaptations, you're just used to either British actors all around or Americans speaking somewhat fancily,
I am an elf.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So Guts is walking away. Where he's going, we don't really know. But Griffith's men see him, and they recognize him as the man who killed Bazuso. And they don't want to kill him because the work is over. But Corcus, one of these Band of the Hawkeyes, sees that, Guts has got a lot of money now. He just got paid. Like, our battle is over. Our war is over because we're done with this battle. But that guy's got money. Let's kill him.
Yeah, let's just rob this guy. Yeah, again, like the great morality of it's like, well, yeah, fight's all over. I'm not mad that he was like on the other side. I just know he's got money. Like he got a big bonus from killing the boss in the last fight. So
Guts is walking with like a huge purse too.
It's weird because Corcus actually talks about how he wanted to kill Bazuzo, but weren't you on the same side back there? So like, were you planning on waiting for like your contract to be up and then you were going to kill him? Or
well, he's one of those guys who again says like, I could do that, but I don't want to.
Professional envy is what he has. But in our next clip, we hear them discuss what to do with Guts.
Griffith, mind if we get him?
Do as you please.
Okay, guys, come with me. What is it? What are you laughing about, Casca?
You don't really think you'll beat him.
That's what you say, but I'm the one who was supposed to defeat Bazuso and become famous. I won't be satisfied until I kill the Wanderer who came between me and my glory.
Then you'll die.
Ha! You'll see what'll happen.
Oh boy, Corcus. Griffith, is it all right to leave this up to him?
Yeah, Corcus is a real jerk, and he has the most early aughts dub voice of all time.
Yes.
I wanted to kill that guy. I'm gonna kill Guts.
That's what he sounds like. I could have done this when I was 19. No one hired me. But yeah, Corcus, one of the many people in this world that underestimate Guts. I mean, I don't know. I think his pride is really getting in the way. Anyone could look at Guts and say, "Don't mess with that guy. We saw what he did. It was not a fluke."
No, it's everybody underestimates it, but at least Corcus, unlike a lot of people, he's got the smarts to be like, "Hey, you attack him first, guys, and we'll all get the money together." Like he lets other people try him first,
And Griffith is shown here as seemingly a non-caring leader, or like even a lazy leader, where he just wants to sleep in the grass, and he just his commands are just very like nonchalant or like uncaring at this point. But we see how formidable he is. And if you read the manga, you see a much different version of Griffith before this one. So.
I guess I get the feeling that Griffith at this time, I wonder if he's letting Corcus do this because he knows that Corcus won't be able to kill him. If he's already thinking like, oh, that guy's pretty strong there. I wonder if I could get him in my army.
That's true. If it's like, well, this will be the first test, and if this guy didn't get lucky or whatever and can kill these idiots who want to rob him, then I'll send Casca, and if she can't stop him, then it's time to finally get involved and do my long-term recruitment plan on this young guy.
Yeah, I think he is thinking, well, let's see how tough he is, and if he is as tough as he seemed, then he's on my side. I gotta get him on my side. And these bandits get the drop on him. They're not bandits, of course, but Guts thinks they are. I guess they are functionally bandits because they want to kill him and steal his money.
Yes, yeah. Close enough, Also, when I see Griffith, I see another influence, I think, like if pretty boy rivals of tough dudes go all the way back to the tale of Miyamoto Musashi, who a real historical figure, but who was a Robin Hood type character, or not as in he's been around that long. Musashi and his pretty boy rival Sasaki Kojiro, very very similar kind of situation, though. Griffith is not. I'd say Kojiro is way nicer than Griffith is. I think he's a more honorable pretty boy rival, I'd say.
That's why in Pokemon, in Japanese, Team Rocket is Musashi and Kojiro.
Right.
They use that analogy a lot in a lot of Japanese media. So what you don't want to do is charge directly at Guts in his giant sword, which is exactly what Dan does, and a geyser of blood erupts across the screen, and then he cuts off this next guy's arm, who's swinging a mace at Guts. He scratches Guts' face, but Guts just chops off his arm.
Yeah.
And that's his punishment. And in this dub, and I think even in the subtitles, these guys are named Dan and Earl. And it tells me they didn't have the script because their names in the manga are Dante and Errol. So I think they transliterated those names in the Japanese, and the localizers took a guess at what they meant.
I think that's a good localization guess there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dante and Errol, like, those are much more packed with reference even there, like those two guys as the names of the dudes who, inconsequential characters, just like the first piles of meat to be carved up by Guts.
I think Earl survives, but yeah, Dan and Earl feel like weird names, even weirder than Guts for some reason. But go ahead.
I guess what I would say is that Guts even says at some point that, the reason why his weapon, the giant sword, is so dangerous isn't because it's sharp. It's because its weight will just fucking crush you and break all your bones, then slice through you like nothing else. So the last thing you want to do is go running at him, because then you're just literally using the leverage against yourself.
That's true.
Yeah. it's a real mistake. But yeah, the men on the hill looking at Guts, looking down upon Guts, are totally wowed by him, even though he killed some of their, friends. And they're also wondering why Corcus and the remaining men don't flee before they're killed. And Casca has a real I told you so kind of moment where she said to Corcus, you're going to die.
Yep. Yeah. She warned him. And now, and then I like Corcus trying to throw the rest of them at him. Like, why don't you do it? Like, yeah. Like, and when Griffith gets a little involved, like, what a scary moment that is. Like, that's so good. Yeah.
You realize you shouldn't underestimate him because, again, he seems like, the sleepy, uncaring, lazy leader, but everyone has to listen to him. Like, Casca does not want to go help and is really outraged, but she has to listen to Griffith.
That one look from his, cold blue eye at her, like, hey, what? She's like, when she says, come on, I don't want, and then Griffith just looks at her like, what? Are you talking back to me? Like, just there's an implicit threat there too. Yeah.
There's one part of Guts' design in this that I really, really like, and I don't know how intentional this is, but you'll notice that Guts has like the little holster on the back of his where he puts the tip of his sword in. When he removes his sword and that little tassel falls to the ground and is attached to his belt, it kind of looks like the tail of a devil.
Yeah, I didn't realize what that was, that hanging tassel, but yeah, that's just to keep his sword in place on his back.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Yeah, that's a good, I think you're right.
So already Guts kind of has like this demonic imagery going on for him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And back on the battlefield, Corcus is trying to send more men to their death, but before he can, Gush rushes at him. Corcus is seemingly about to die, and Guts gets an arrow fired into his bicep.
Yeah, right there.
And then we see that it's Casca who was holding this crossbow riding into battle on her horse, and she is the one who shot Guts, preventing him from killing Corcus.
I feel like if a crossbow bolt was shot right into my arm, I don't think I'd react like Guts does here.
You wouldn't just tear it out?
Yeah, and not think about like, oh, I'm going to bleed to death right now. I mean, Guts must have triple the blood most people have based on what I've seen, how much he bleeds and fights.
He's full of blood.
I think the implication from like a quote unquote lore perspective, or from like the more fantastical elements of the story, is that Guts is like half dead or something already because he was born from a corpse. So like death just doesn't know what to do with this guy at times. You think he's going to die, but I don't know. I just don't know what to do with this guy. He should be dead, but he's not.
But in our next clip, Casca saves the day.
Casca, are you backing me up?
Of course I'm not. I'm here on Griffith's order. Now, step back.
A woman?
You bastard!
Oh my God! Casca's being driven into a corner.
None of us can beat Casca, except for Griffith.
His skill and the strength of his blows. I'm gonna die.
So Guts knocks Casca off her horse, and in doing so knocks off her helmet, and we see that it's a woman.
Gasp.
And what a woman. Ring-a-ding-ding. In case we didn't go over the Japanese voice actors, but the same voice actor for Casca is the voice actor for Asuka in Evangelion.
Cool. That's cool.
Playing a similar-ish character. And actually, the voice actor for Guts is also the voice actor for Knuckles and all the Sonic the Hedgehog stuff.
That's cool.
Which is a hilarious voice to have for Knuckles. Knuckles has a very deep and menacing voice in Japanese.
Well, Idris Elba, he's making it work.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. The Guts again. This action, it's great in theory, but yeah, it's just like sometimes it's just like clang, clang, clang. Like it doesn't. I wish it looked cooler. That's the only. But once you see it on the page, it's like your imagination builds it up so much bigger.
And it's the fighting anime shortcut of cutting to a crowd of people. Did you just see what he did?
Yes, yeah.
He's so powerful.
A whole lot of description.
Whoa.
And a zoom in of Casca's face going like, he's so strong. I never yes, yeah.
And before
none of us have been able to beat them except for him.
Giving this needless exposition. Hey, it's in the manga too. They say that in the manga where it's like, well, it's telling you more about Casca. It's like, well, she's actually very, very strong. She's the strongest one there, despite being a woe man.
Yeah. I think Guts also probably hasn't talked to a woman since his mother died at this point, I think.
It's never happened. So before Guts can bring his sword down on Casca, a spear comes in, lands between his legs, that stops him from killing Casca, and we see Griffith on a horseback in full armor. This is the first time in the entire episode that there's music. And we hear it upon the reveal of Griffith in full armor for the first time.
Yeah, it just hit me that there's not music till Griffith's arrival in his cool falcon helmet. What a cool look he's got, and on his gray horse. I like his. His design is very striking.
And Griffith wants Guts to, stop the fighting. In fact, there's another weird translation thing where in the manga, I think he says, "Will you lower your sword?" In the anime, he says, "Will you put up your sword?" So I didn't understand that, but he's basically just saying, "Are you going to fight me too, Guts?"
Yeah.
And Guts raises his sword in defiance, and he rushes Griffith, and Griffith easily blocks his giant sword with just the back of his much smaller
move,
like rapier or whatever he's got there,
which shows he's actually super strong. He looks like a soft boy, but he's actually incredibly strong to block a huge sword like that with his rapier.
Just the back of his hand, too. He just easily deflects it. And when Guts is kind of, rebounding from his attack, Griffith pierces him. In the manga, he pierces him all the way through his torso. In this one, he just kind of pokes him.
Yeah. It's not as deep, but it's still... It also shows Guts is very... this is displayed more on the page too in the preceding chapters to this one. But Guts is incredibly accurate at hitting the weak points in armor. Even when he's 9, he survives his first battle because he's that's where the guy's neck joint is. Stab, right in there. And then here's Griffith getting him in the same weak point.
And Griffith could have killed him. It's pointed out later. He purposely didn't aim directly for his heart. This is all part of Griffith's plan, by the way. He's a schemer, that Griffith.
He's grooming in a way, I'd say.
But the men cheer for Griffith. Casca tells them to not celebrate because Corcus got them all into this mess, and 2 guys are seemingly dead because of this.
Yeah, it's how incredibly wasteful. And then just also how again Guts just through sheer willpower standing himself up on his blade, using his blade to lift him to kind of keep himself upright. That is such a cool I have a feeling they probably do that a lot in the series, but it's such a cool visual.
Yeah, you think Guts is done for. He might go in for one more attack, but he falls flat on his face. So getting pierced to the chest was too much even for Guts. And this is when we get the grand reveal of Griffith as a beautiful, beautiful man. And Guts sees his face and passes out. So yeah, Griffith is a real Bishonen.
Yeah, more feminine than Casca is. Casca with her short hair and, binding that makes her have a more masculine figure. It's meanwhile Griffith is the prettiest person in the group. Yeah.
And there's a break, of course, commercial break. We come back.
Boy, what a cheap eye catch! It's
no art,
no art, no sound, just black and red text. Yeah,
I think those were falling out of fashion by the late 90s. But we come back to more allusions to Guts' backstory that I mentioned that don't really make too much sense if you haven't read the manga, but you just know there's a traumatic element of his past. We see a naked little boy, that's him, being chased by this demonic red hand. His sword won't work against it. He's calling to this man named Gambino for help. He's at top of this pile of skeleton bones and skulls, petting this dog, and Guts begs for him to help. And in the manga, you know what's going on because you've met Gambino before. And Gambino, the dog he's petting, is actually Guts' adopted mom, a dog with her face.
Yes, yeah. And he tells them, like, no, you killed me, and I wished you were dead. Like, just that he's, and yeah, I mean, the monster represents his sexual assaulter. Like, yeah, it's all, and that, I mean, too, though, like, as foreshadowing for what Guts' life will be, he's also just surrounded by these skeletons telling him, like, you know, you should be dead. You should be dead. Like, just so intense. Oh, my God.
Yeah, Gambino won't help him. He erupts in blood. In the manga, he, like, kind of takes his own head off and saying, you know, you killed me. Look, I'm practically dead. There's a clip, but I won't play it because it's not necessary to play the clip. It's just a little boy being traumatized by his memories of sexual assault. But they allude to it in ways the manga is like, well, here's what happened.
Yeah. Which, again, it feels, both in that and the depiction of decapitation, it feels like content choices to not be as explicit on TV. Even if it's late night TV, you can't, especially then, you could not just do whatever you felt like. We've said this before, like on our Animatrix podcast, you know, as an American with the limited anime that got brought over to the US in the 90s, you would get the most R-rated stuff that would lead you to believe, oh, is all Japanese animation like this? Like, no, that would be like us getting like Game of Thrones and that's the only American show we saw and thought like, wow, they show this at like 6 p.m. on the top network in America? That's crazy. Like, yeah.
Now, the thing you mentioned earlier, Henry, the real life event that caused Japanese media to become less violent, the first instance of that happened in March of 97.
Wow, so it is fresh then, that content, that real life.
Yeah, it's called the Kobe child murderers. You can look it up if you want to. And the second instance happened in May.
That name kind of tells you all I need to know.
Yes, and the second instance happened in May of 97 while Berserk is running. So immediately people are, you know, cutting back on violence because it's happening in Japan to children in very horrifying ways. Yeah. So there you go.
Sorry, not to be a bring down.
Thanks for bringing up children being decapitated on this Berserk podcast, Henry.
Sorry.
It's okay. But yeah, we cut back from this dream sequence. We see naked Guts. He's bandaged, is gritting his teeth, saying, "Don't touch me," and over again. We think he's still having a fever dream because the naked body of Casca fades into existence on top of him. Is it a dream? Did it really happen? We're going to find out soon. And he comes to not knowing where he is, and he sits up. His wounds are not fully healed, but he comes out. He emerges into this mercenary camp. Everyone there is very, very young. He's kind of taken aback by their youth.
You know, he wakes up naked in a bed looking at an unfamiliar ceiling, just like Shinji.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think he had some shorts on, though.
Oh, sure.
But, yeah, Casca is yelling at Griffith. She marches towards Guts. And Guts recognizes the eyes of the woman he saw in what he thought was his dream.
So she was warming him up with her body against his.
Yes.
Which, yeah.
That was her job, I guess.
A woman's job, which that's pretty shitty of Griffith to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Griffith, as we learn, is shitty in a lot of ways, but he gets worse, actually. He somehow gets worse.
Yeah, Casca slugs Guts in the guts and says, you know, if I had my way, you'd be dead.
And that's a real Asuka thing to say, too. So it'd be funny to hear that voice, to hear the voice actor say that in Japanese. It should have clicked for me that I was hearing Asuka's voice actress when I watched the Japanese version of this.
It can be kind of distracting once you hear it. But in our next clip, Guts gets an explanation as to what just happened.
Don't let it get to you. Casca is the restless type, always rebelling against her life as a mercenary. It's probably because she's far more skilled than the rest of us. She still can't get over that Griffith gave her the order to lie down by you for 2 whole days. You were shivering. You had lost so much blood after the fight that your body needed to be warmed. He told her it's a woman's duty to warm a man.
Did she wake you with a punch? I am Griffith. And you are?
I'm Guts.
Huh? A great weapon. A bit much for me, though. Would you care to join me for a walk?
So Guts gets his sword back and goes with Griffith. The other men are looking on with resentment, like, who's this new guy? Why is the boss so into him?
You know, that's another like localization thing that I think the manga or the English edition that we have does better, where when Griffith is handing him the sword, he's like, I could never wield it. Like the way in this English he says a bit too much for me is it almost sounds like he's saying like that's ostentatious. Like I wouldn't use such a giant. Instead, I like it so much better as a compliment that he says like, oh yeah, you could probably kill me with my sword, but I couldn't use your sword to kill you. Yeah.
The way it's said in the dub, you can read it a few ways. And by going with Griffith for their little chat, we learn about who he is and who he's with, the Band of the Hawk. Guts recognizes the name, how powerful they are, and that they're called Death on the Battlefield. They're a very, very powerful and popular mercenary group. People are aware of them and are terrified of them.
Mm-hmm. And then we get that shot of the cute kid Rickert, which... The second I was like, wait, he got named and he's cute. He's the youngest one. He's got to be a character that matters.
Yes, and he, like all these characters, he's dead meat eventually. But let's hear Rickert in our next clip, actually.
What do you suppose Griffith is up to? He shouldn't have spared that brute's life.
Well, I assume he intends to have that guy join us.
Huh?
We saw with our own eyes how powerful he is. I'm pretty sure he's going to be a great addition to our army.
Never! Don't be ridiculous, Rickett. He cut Earl's arm off and sent Dan to his grave. The bastard killed our comrades. I can't pretend that never happened. Isn't that right, Pippin?
And yes, just like in Lord of the Rings, we get a Pippin. Although this Pippin is not a little hobbit. He's a very large, like almost like, what's that character from Robin Hood? Little John style character?
Yeah, Little John.
Yeah, just like a big guy with squinty eyes looking off in the distance.
Also, I thought Rickon actually survived, but I might be wrong about that.
He might, there are a few survivors, and that might be one of them. I know a few survived to help Guts in the future.
And then we even see a literal hawk flying overhead just to make it even more important, this meeting.
In case you don't know, they're the Band of the Hawk, and they're cresting the hill. Griffith is like kind of distracted by the view, like, look how beautiful it is, and Guts is like, I don't see beauty in anything.
Like,
why didn't you kill me? Like, why didn't you kill me? And we see Casca eavesdropping behind a tree. In our next clip here, we hear what Griffith's intentions are.
Because I want you to join me, Guts.
What?
I watched the duel between you and Bezuso at the castle. You were magnificent. But the fight was quite close. If Bezuso's axe had not been cracked, you would have lost your head.
Probably.
At least you're honest. Judging by the way you fight, it seems you value victory more than your own life. You never yield an inch, even when faced with a monster like Bezuso, or outnumbered by a gang on horseback. On the contrary, you would rather recklessly engage any opponent that crosses your path. You are certainly brave, but I believe you purposefully put your life in danger and seek the meaning of your existence by battling to preserve it.
So Griffith figured him out instantly.
Yep. He tells him, like, you're berserk. Like, he's just...
What are you, some kind of berserk guy? Is that what your story is?
Though, I mean, that's a very also, like, cool anime guy thing to do of psychoanalysis via battle. Like, by watching you battle, I learned all I need to know about you. Yeah.
There's a funny moment in the manga that I kind of like and I wish was in this, where Griffith says, I want you, Guts, and Guts is like, what are you, some kind of homo?
Yes. You know, it's very accurate for its time. Yeah. I can see why they didn't want to add in, like, comedic gay panic to this scene. But I
think I think he's just being honest. Like, I'm not going to fuck you, dude.
Yes. Yeah. I mean... He says, like, oh, you want me to be your fag boy or something?
Yeah.
Guts does say that, and I can say that. But,
he's just like, what are you, into buggery or something?
Yes. Yeah, because he is like, you know, he's like, what, you're a man who wants to have sex with me who looks like you? Fuck you, man. Like, and then it's fun. In the comic, Griffith they play it for a joke, and I think Griffith tries to reset, like, no, I want you on the army, dude. Like, why are you making this? Why are you making this sexual? I'm just trying to hire you.
I'm trying to be cool and enigmatic here.
Yeah.
I recall there being a funny scene later on where he gives Guts a book, and Guts opens up, and it's just straight up gay porn inside.
Yeah, I mean, when I watched this originally, there were lots of jokes about like Guts and Griffith are gay with each other, and I think Griffith is so he's just fixated on ambition that he's not concerned with like any kind of sex. And at some point in this arc, he does kind of get with a princess or like a female member of royalty, but there's no love involved.
Sex is power to him. I mean, what he says in this fight about like he doesn't mind taking things by force. Like it's sex is power to him, not love. Anyway,
we talk about shoujo influence in this anime and this manga a lot, and this scene in particular reminds me a lot of like the shoujo-esque kind of dynamic almost, where there's Casca over by the tree, and she's like listening in on these two men as they have their bitter rivalry. And, you know, she, as we learn, likes Griffith, and she admires Griffith, and she kind of maybe wants to get with him. But as we also learn, she also kind of develops the feelings for Guts later on down the line. So this is sort of like her wrestling with her emotions almost. And yeah, it is very shoujo in that sense almost.
It's the perfect beginning of a love triangle scene. You know, she's like literally in between them, hiding behind a tree as she's watching this play out. Yeah.
So Guts is really taken aback by this. He doesn't know what Griffith's intentions are, and he gets in his face saying he'll never join. But, you know, he's still injured, so he kind of drops to his knee. Like, even yelling at this man is causing him incredible pain. But Griffith is like, he remains calm throughout everything. That's kind of like his main trait.
Yeah.
It's just incredible calmness.
Guts is so passionate. It's a fun dynamic they play on there. And two, it gives like, here we are going to see, we already had the round one of their fight. Now we're going to see round two. But to set it up, Guts has to, like, they make it explicit in the comic too. They're like, well, Guts, you did almost die. You're probably not you're 100% right now, you know?
Yeah. And Guts pulls like a "you don't know me," basically, and Griffith admits that, like, I don't, but I have a feeling about you. And you know, if you know Berserk, you know Griffith wants to use Guts for his rise to power. But Guts is part of this world, and he realizes, like, well, number one, you started this fight. Number two, I killed two of your men. You think I'm going to let you forget that, you know, or that you'll just forget about that and forgive me? Why would you ever trust me? And in our final clip here, Guts has a challenge for Griffith.
What do you want then?
Well, that's simple. To settle this with swords. I'll make a hole in your chest as big as this one when I win.
What if I win?
Do whatever you want with me.
As you wish. I rather enjoy settling things by force.
Griffith!
Leave us alone, Casca.
But...
No matter what, I will have what I want.
I've had enough of this bullshit. You make me sick!
And we end with another postcard memory of Guts and Griffith clashing.
Those explosions are the shutter on the postcard memory each time. Yeah. It's it's a great. That's not where like the comic chapter ends, but I think that's a great ending point for an episode of like, the battle is about to begin, and so the next episode can start with the cool battle. And you know, if you're a viewer, you're like, well, I'm coming back next week. I got to see that battle.
I was surprised the chapter didn't end there, because the manga chapter it's adapting, the chapter keeps going, but it's a good cliffhanger though.
Yeah, Miura's pacing is surprises me in a lot of ways. And I'm like, well, wait, this is where the chapter ends? Like, I feel that several times at the end of chapters.
Also, the chapters, some of them are like 60 pages long.
Also that.
And that's very unorthodox for manga. But yeah, that's the end of our episode about Berserk. Devin, any final thoughts about Berserk, its legacy, and if people should watch this or not? I think we've convinced them we should have. It's a great series in both manga and anime form. This anime, to be specific.
it's just such a shame to think that, such a talented author, such a magnificent artist, such a amazing writer, he was just taken from us too early, and his magnum opus, his big work that he's been working on all this time, it just ended like that. And it's just such a shame to think that it all had to be taken from us so soon. It's just sad to think about. Hang in there, Oda. Hang in there. Just please hang on 10 more years, please. Just 10 more years, Oda.
Take lots of breaks, drink lots of water. My final thoughts are very simple. I thank you again, Devin, for being a patron and supporting this, and thank you again for helping me rediscover Berserk, because it's the year 2022, and I have become a Berserk guy again, and after 2 years of COVID, I am just like Guts. I'm back to where I was when I was 19. I'm just like Guts. I'm living his struggle, and everything is so unfair to me. Henry, how about you?
Yeah, no, Devin, thank you for picking this one, because, I had the book sitting on my shelf, and this anime is good, but I think I actually like that we live in a world where there's no great anime adaptation, and you don't really have the choice of saying, oh, you should watch the anime. Like, even just for the Golden Age arc, I would still say, like, the comic is just so perfect. Like, it is just like, it is what it is. You're not wanting for anything. This is one of the top things I would say. Like, for JoJo, I'd say I think you can get a great experience watching the anime, and you don't need to read the comic if you don't want to put the time into it. But Berserk's comic feels essential to me, and I'm going to keep buying these giant things that'll be a huge weight on my moving whenever that happens.
Tip those movers extra for moving your Berserks. Devin, anything you want to plug, or do you want people to find you online?
I stream over on twitch.tv/Shirosuke1989. That is SHIROUSUKE 1989. And me and my friend Haley just stream a bunch of games over there. We also upload it to my YouTube channel, which I won't mention that here because it's not important. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I'm going to be streaming a bunch of Souls games leading up to Elden Ring, but those are probably going to be done by the time this comes out, so don't bother with that. And other than that, I've just been on my own is all.
Thanks again, Devin. We're looking forward to your next pick. Another great pick from you. So thanks again.
And it was so cool how you engaged in the Discord and let everybody vote in it. It was a nice plug for our Discord as well. If you're a patron, you should be checking that out.
For once, democracy works. Devin, go for it.
For once, democracy works. Yeah. And if you want to join the Discord, I don't know if I'll ever do something like this again. But if I do something like this again, then you can join the Discord by joining their Patreon and becoming a patron.
Thank you, Devin.
We'll tell them all about that soon, but we appreciate it, Devin.
Yes, thank you so much, Devin.
So thanks again to Devin for being a top-tier patron, sponsoring this episode, and picking the topic. It was really great. If you want to be cool like Devin, please head on over to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Sign up there for $5 a month. You can get all these episodes 1 week at a time and ad-free, and also access to everything behind the $5 paywall. That includes our exclusive limited miniseries episodes, over 100 to date, and also that gives you access to monthly episodes of both Talking Futurama and Talk King of the Hill, our 2 monthly exclusive Patreon miniseries, only behind the $5 paywall, only at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And there is a $10 level on the Patreon as well. When you sign up for that, naturally you get all the $5 stuff, of course, and also access to 1 mega-long podcast once a month, only for patrons of that level or higher. And what is that, Henry?
Bob is talking about the What a Cartoon Movie podcast. Now, if you're a subscriber on the free feed, you're used to hearing the preview of each month's on this. But if you want to hear the full thing, you at the $10 level can do that at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Last week, you just got to hear us talk about South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut. You can hear the full thing, bigger, longer, and uncut, at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Last month before that, we did The Lion King 2. This month, we're doing Pinocchio, the Disney Golden Age classic. And, of course, if you liked all the talk in this about Millennium Actress, you gotta listen to our full podcast about Millennium Actress and another tragically short career of a brilliant artist. Please check all of it out at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons today.
So I've been one of your hosts, Bob Mackey. You can find me on Twitter as Bob Servo, and my other podcast, by the way, is Retronauts, the classic gaming podcast all about old video games. You can find that wherever you find podcasts, of course, but also please go to patreon.com/retronauts. Sign up there for 2 full-length bonus episodes every month. And Henry, how about you?
I am HENEREYG on Twitter. Follow that for all your Henry Gilbert updates. And you should also follow @TalkSimpsonsPod on Twitter, the official Twitter account of this podcast network. Stay up to date with all the cool stuff that comes out. And always remember that if you're looking for a easy-to-search archive of all the free podcasts we put out, check out it and tons of other cool stuff at TalkingSimpsonsPodcast.com.
Thank you so much for listening, folks. We'll see you again next time for our extended free preview of our March episode of What a Cartoon Movie, all about Pinocchio, and we'll see you then.
The story has begun. While they are entwined with strings spun by fate, a boy cries out and a girl feels, I want you for the one I care about. A young man who has fought for survival with his sword embarks on his journey. Where will destiny take him?